Hey dreamer, welcome back. Let yourself settle now, however you are lying, and feel the weight of your body soft against whatever is holding you. There is nothing to carry tonight. The day is already behind you, already growing quiet, already dissolving the way mist dissolves at the edges of a warm morning, and you do not need to hold on to any of it. Let it go. Let it all go. You can drift off whenever you like. That is the whole purpose of this. Not to keep you here, but to give you something warm and slow and ancient to float on while you find your way to sleep. You don't have to stay awake for any of it. If the story grows soft and distant, and you cannot follow anymore, that is exactly right. That is the point. There is nothing here you need to remember in the morning. So let your breath slow now, a little, and let your eyes, if they are not already closed, grow heavy and still. Somewhere very far away, before there were mountains, before there were rivers, before there were trees or shores, or the sound of wind moving through long grass, there was only a great drifting quiet, only mist, only the slow breathing of a world not yet begun. That is where we are going tonight. Chapter 1. The Drifting Mist. There was no light yet, not exactly, and no dark either. Only a soft, diffuse glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, the way the sky looks sometimes just before dawn, when it is neither one thing nor another, and the whole world seems to be holding its breath. The mist was everywhere. It moved without hurry, in long, slow currents that folded and unfolded themselves, and it was neither cold nor warm, but something in between. Something that felt almost like the moment just before sleep, where the body is no longer quite sure where it ends and the bed begins. There was no sound, or rather, there was one sound, a deep, almost imperceptible hum, so low you would not have called it a sound at all, but simply a feeling, a sense of something present and patient and very, very old. The world was resting before it began. Nothing was heavy here. Nothing was hard. The mist did not press down or close in, but simply drifted, endlessly, the way breath drifts in a quiet room, there and gone, there and gone. And in this vast and gentle nowhere, something was beginning slowly, the way the first warmth begins at the very edge of morning. So gradual you cannot say exactly when the cold ends and the warmth begins. This is the oldest story, older than memory, old enough that it has settled into something safe and sure, the way a river settles into its bed and flows there without effort, without thinking about it year after year. Here then is the beginning. In the beginning they came into being the way mist becomes cloud, without effort, without announcement, without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened. The heavenly kami, the divine presences, the quiet ones who held the first breath of the world, simply were, the way silence simply is, filling all the spaces between sounds without trying to. They were many and they were gentle, and they moved through the formless world as soft currents move through still water, unhurried, leaving no disturbance. They did not speak loudly. They did not need to. There was nothing yet that needed speaking about, and nothing to be done that could not wait. And the entire vast unformed world was theirs to move through as slowly as they pleased. And so, in that unhurried way, they looked at the drifting sea of mist below them and felt, not urgency, not need, but something more like a kind of quiet tenderness, the way you might feel looking at an empty room that is about to become a home, seeing in its blankness not absence, but the soft promise of everything that will one day fill it. In this way, among all those gentle heavenly presences, two were chosen, or perhaps they chose themselves, or perhaps it is not quite right to say either thing. Perhaps they simply stepped forward the way a good thought rises from stillness, easy and natural and already whole. Their names were Izanagi and Izanami, the one who invites, and the one who invites in return. And they were, from the moment of their being, made to find each other. They stood together at the edge of what the heavenly ones called the floating bridge of heaven, a long and luminous span that arched from the sky into the nothing below, and they looked down together at all that soft and nameless mist. They were not in a hurry. They had between them all the time there ever was, and they both knew it, and this knowing settled into them like warmth settles into cold hands held near a lamp, slowly all the way in until there is no place in them that does not know it. The heavenly kami, those calm and ancient presences, came to them then with a gift, and the gift was a spear, not sharp, not cold, not anything like a weapon, smooth and cool against the palm, and set with stones the color of sea foam and pale morning sky, stones that seemed to carry their own soft light the way water carries the sky's reflection, shimmering faintly, never quite still. It was a beautiful thing, a quiet thing. And when they held it together, Izanagi's hands and Izanami's hands overlapping on its long, smooth length, it felt less like an instrument of doing and more like a key, a way of saying to the world, we are here and we are ready and we are gentle. They leaned together over the edge of the floating bridge of heaven, and they let the spear down into the mist. It entered slowly. There was no resistance, no sound, only the soft swallowing of the mist around it, and then the faint sensation, not quite heard but felt, deep in the chest, like the pulse of something large and sleeping, of the world below beginning, just faintly, to be aware of their presence. They began to stir it, gently, the way you might stir warm water, slowly, in a large and quiet bowl, watching the surface turn and settle into new shapes that are not quite the shapes from before. The mist curled around the spear's tip as they moved it. It folded and unfolded. It breathed, and then they lifted it. The spear rose, smooth and slow, up through the air between the mist and the bridge, and as it cleared the surface, a single drop gathered at its tip, bright and clear and round as a held breath, and hung there for one long, still moment, catching the diffuse glow of that ancient sky and holding it, magnified, like a small lamp, like the first small lamp there ever was. The drop fell. It fell slowly, the way things fall in dreams, without hurry, turning once in the air with a kind of unhurried grace. And when it touched the sea, when that single bright drop met the wide and waiting mist, there was no splash, no sound, only a soft and gradual solidness, a thickening, a becoming. Where before there had been nothing but water and cloud and the slow drift of all that formlessness, there was now something still and small and whole, an island, the first island in all the world, Onagoro, the island that formed itself, that gathered itself from the mist the way a thought gathers itself from quiet, becoming real simply by being given the smallest, gentlest nudge. It sat in the sea below the bridge, green and hushed and very still, its shores pale and clean, its surface soft with the first grass, its center rising into a low and rounded hill. It smelled of rain and salt and something sweeter underneath, something that had no name yet because nothing had names yet, but that you would know if you were there, as the smell of newness, not cold newness, not empty newness, but the warm and waiting kind, the kind that says, "Come in, we have been expecting you." Izanagi and Izanami looked at it together. Then they descended. The bridge brought them down as gently as light comes down through deep water, gradually, without effort, until their feet touched the pale shore of Onogoro, and the island received them the way good earth receives rain, quietly, without drama, as though it had been shaped with exactly this moment in mind. And it had been, in its way. Everything had been. They walked inland slowly, side by side, and the new grass bent softly beneath their steps and straightened again behind them, and the shore breathed with the incoming tide, and all the mist that surrounded their small new island moved in long, unhurried circles, as though the world itself was already, even here at its very beginning, learning how to rest. At the center of the island there was a pillar, a great pillar, tall and smooth, worn to softness at its surface, standing in the pale grass as though it had always been there, as though the island had been formed around it, the way a pearl forms around something small and still at its center. They knew what it was for. They knew without being told, the way you know, sometimes, without being told, that a thing is good and right and ready. And so they walked around it. Izanagi went one way, and Izanami went the other, each moving in a slow and easy circle, and the air between them was warm and still, and the island was very quiet, and the sea moved at the edges of their world with the long, slow patience of something that has always been and will always be. When they met again on the far side of the pillar, face to face, the world breathed in, and when they spoke, soft words, a greeting, a recognition, the kind of words that cannot be translated into anything except the feeling they carry, the world breathed out. They were married, they were together. And because they were together, and because the world was ready, they began, slowly, without effort, the way a dream unfolds, to bring forth the rest of it. The islands came first, drawn up from the sea one by one, each one small and particular and exactly itself. The islands of the long, curved land, settling into the sea like stones settling into a riverbed, finding their places with a kind of natural ease. And with the islands came the kami of all the living things that would one day fill them, not arriving with fanfare, not stepping forward to be named, but simply and gently coming into being the way the parts of a dream come into being, present before you quite realize they arrived. The kami of rivers came, and the rivers came with them, threading through the new land in long silver curves, moving slowly between the hills. The kami of trees came, and where they went the forests began, not all at once, but gradually, the way forests always grow, one tree and then another near it, and then their roots and branches finding each other in the quiet dark of the soil. The kami of wind came and moved through all of this very gently, stirring the new leaves, carrying the smell of the sea inland and the smell of green things back out to the shore. The kami of mountains rose without hurry and without sound, one low and ancient peak after another, and the kami of the shore walked the long edges of all the new land and made the place where sea meets earth into something soft and gradual, a threshold rather than a border. All of this was slow. All of this was quiet. The world was being made the way sleep comes. You cannot quite say when it begins, and you do not need to, and trying to say would only wake you up. And through it all, through every river found and every hill raised and every shore smoothed by the patient touch of tide, there was that same diffuse and generous light, not quite the sun, not yet. The sun would come in her own time and bring something far brighter and warmer than any of this, but a soft and steady glow that held the whole new world, the way water holds warmth, gently all through, leaving nothing cold or dark. The young land rested in it. The rivers rested. The new trees rested. The hills and shores and wind all rested. Everything that had come into being settled into itself, finding its own particular stillness, becoming more wholly what it was with every passing moment of quiet. And then it was done, or it was resting, and it was hard to say which, because in the very beginning, those two things might have been the same. Izanagi and Izanami stood at the center of all they had gently made and were very still. The island breathed beneath them. The sea breathed beyond it. The mist that had been everything, the vast formless, waiting mist of the beginning, had not disappeared, but had simply changed its nature, moving now around the edges of real things, soft at the borders, drifting along the shores of the new islands, and resting in the valleys between the new hills, and hanging low over the rivers in the early. But there was no early yet, not quite. The sun had not yet risen, and so there was only this, the in-between, the before the first morning, the last long stillness before the world's very first day. Nothing needed to happen now. Nothing was waiting. Nothing was unfinished in any way that mattered tonight. The world simply was, small and new and green and breathing. You do not have to carry any of this forward. You do not have to keep track of the islands, or remember the names of the rivers, or hold any of it in your mind. None of it needs your attention tonight. Let it be there, the way something warm is simply there, the weight of a blanket, the sound of rain outside a window. Present, but asking nothing. The kami of rivers were at rest in their rivers. The kami of trees were at rest in their trees. The wind had grown very slow, barely a breath, and the sea had gentled to a surface so calm it could have been glass. And the island of Onogoro sat at the center of all this quietness, like a soft lamp set down on a table at the end of a long and gentle day. All was well. All had always been going to be well. This is, in its way, the comfort of very old stories. Not that they are exciting, but that they are already over, already finished, already whole, and you are only visiting them the way you might visit a place that has been at peace for a very long time, feeling the peace of it settle into you simply by being there. Rest now. You have been to the beginning of the world tonight, and it was quiet, and it was kind, and there was nothing sharp in it anywhere. Let the story grow soft at the edges now. Let it drift the way mist drifts, not gone, only loosening, only spreading out into something larger and more formless. And that is exactly right. That is what it wants to do. The first island is resting. The first rivers are resting. The hills and the trees and the long pale shores are all resting in that still and generous light, waiting for the morning that is coming in its own time, without hurry, without any need for you to stay awake for it. Somewhere in the story, in the deep and quiet time before the very first sunrise, something is gathering, a warmth, a golden warmth, patient and unhurried, the warmth of a goddess not yet woken, already present, already holding the world from very far away, in a light that does not press or demand, but only waits, soft and sure and gold, the way morning always waits. You don't need to wait for it. You are already in the warmth of it. It is already here, around you, the same warm light that has always been here. The story will be exactly where you left it when you come back to it. All the islands will still be there, and the rivers, and the mist moving in its slow circles, and Izanagi and Izanami standing quietly at the center of everything they gently made. Nothing will have moved without you. Nothing needs to. So there is nothing left to do tonight. No more to follow, no more to hold. Let it all grow distant and soft and warm, the way the last light of day grows distant, the way the sounds of the outside world grow soft, and then softer, and then simply become part of the gentle dark. You have already done everything you need to do. You have come this far, and it was enough, and now the world is resting, and you can rest with it. Let your breath settle. Let your hands soften. Let your thoughts slow to the long, unhurried drift of mist over a quiet sea, moving without purpose, without destination, simply moving because movement is what mist does, and it requires nothing of you at all. The first island rests in the first sea. The first night rests in the first dark. And you are held, and you are safe, and the story is safe, and there is nothing here that asks anything of you anymore. Let it go. Let it all go. And let yourself go. Chapter 2. The Land of Soft Shadow. The world that Izanagi and Izanami had made together was still young and very quiet, the way a room is quiet after someone has been in it for a long time, full of a warmth that has not yet faded and will not for a long while yet. The islands lay in their sea like stones resting in still water, each one settled in particular and exactly itself. The rivers moved between the hills in long, unhurried curves, catching what light there was, and carrying it forward in a slow silver ripple that faded and gathered again and faded. The forests stood in the breathing dark with their roots deep and their branches loose and easy, and the wind that moved through them was barely a wind at all, only a slow turning of the cool night air, a gentleness that brushed the new leaves and let them be. The shores of Onogoro, that first small island, with its pale sand and its low central hill, were very still, the tide coming in and going out so quietly it was almost indistinguishable from the steady, patient rhythm of breath. Everything had settled into itself. Everything had found its shape and rested there. This is a world where nothing sharp exists yet, where everything that lives here is new and soft and glad of its newness, and where the darkness of night is not a hollow thing, but a full one, warm and thick with the smell of green things and salt and the particular kindness of a world not yet worn at the edges. Come in and stay for a little while. You are safe here. You have always been safe here. It was Izanami who felt it first. She had been moving through the young world all the long, slow days of the beginning, her hands trailing in the rivers, her steps soft on the hills, and there was a rightness to all of it, a deep and settled rightness, the feeling of a thing being in its place, of work that was finished and good. She and Izanagi had made all of this together, the islands and the kami and the living breath of the rivers and the trees, and the world was whole and well, and she had been glad. But as the seasons turned in their new and gentle way, she grew quieter. It was not a sickness, not exactly, and it was not a sorrow. It was more like the feeling that comes at the end of a very long, very good day, a weight behind the eyes, a softening of the edges of things, a gradual drawing inward, the way a lamp burns lower in the late hours, not because something is wrong, but because the hour is simply late, and the lamp has given all its light and needs now to be still. She moved more slowly. She rested more often. She sat for long, unhurried hours at the shores of the new islands and watched the sea, and her watching was peaceful, the way deep rest is peaceful, full rather than empty. Izanagi would find her sometimes in those long, quiet hours, and he would sit beside her without speaking, because there was nothing that needed saying, and they had always understood each other without words the way two people understand each other, who have been together long enough that the words are only the surface of something much deeper. She was growing tired. That was all. She was growing gently, deeply, completely tired, the way the world itself grows tired at the end of autumn, all the green things drawing their life quietly inward, making themselves small and still in interior, resting not because the world is done, but because the world knows how to wait. And there came a day, a soft day, with the light gentle and the air cool at the edges and the sea barely moving, When she went to rest in the land of shadow, Yomi, the quiet land, the land beneath, the place of soft shadow and deep rest. Not a frightening place, not in this telling. Only the deepest room in a long and quiet house, the room at the end of a corridor where the light does not quite reach, where the air is still and cool and undisturbed, where the sounds of the waking world come faintly, if at all, muffled and soft and far away, like sounds heard from the edge of sleep. A place where things could be entirely still, where rest was complete and without interruption, where the world above could go on in its gentle way without asking anything of those who needed to be still for a while. She went there the way the day goes at evening, gradually, without drama, the light of her simply growing softer and more inward, until the border between waking and sleeping was so gentle that no one could have said exactly when she crossed it. She was at rest. She was at peace. She had given the world everything she had to give, and now the world could hold what she had given it, and she could be still. Izanagi felt her absence the way you feel the absence of a sound you have grown so used to that you stop noticing it, not with a sharpness, not with a start, but with a gradual awareness, a slow realization that something familiar and good was no longer in its usual place. He moved through the world they had made together and touched the things she had touched, the smooth stones at the river's edge, the pale sand of Onogoro's shore, the low hill at the island's center where the pillar still stood, unchanged, in the first grass. He ran his hand along the pillar's worn surface and stood there for a long time in the quiet. He missed her. He missed her the way you miss the warmth of a room after the lamp has been taken out, not with urgency, but with a kind of tender awareness, an ache that is quiet enough to simply sit with. And so he went to find her, not with speed, not with any wild or reaching need, but with the slow and steady purpose of someone who knows the way and knows there is no hurrying it. He walked the long road down to the border of the land of shadow, through the deepening hills and the cooling air and the gradual dimming of the light, and with each step the world grew quieter around him, and the quiet was not frightening but familiar, the way the quiet of a house late at night is familiar, simply the world with its daytime busyness put gently away. At the border of Yomi there was a threshold, not a great gate, not a wall of stone, only a place where the light changed, where the air grew still and cool and different in quality, where the sounds of the upper world fell away entirely and were replaced by a deep and restful silence, a silence that breathed, a silence that had been undisturbed for a long time and would be undisturbed for a long time more. He stood at that threshold and felt its stillness around him like water around a held breath. And softly, very softly, as though calling into a room where someone sleeps, he spoke to her across it. He told her that the rivers she had tended were still moving, and that the trees she had walked beneath were still standing, and that the pale shore of Onogoro was still quiet in the early light, and that the islands they had brought up together from the sea still lay there green and particular and exactly themselves, and that all of it was well. He told her that the world was good, and that she had made it so, and that he carried her presence in every river and every hill and every soft and unhurried hour that the young world lived through. He told her that he loved her the way the shore loves the tide, without grip, without holding, only meeting and receiving and letting go and meeting again. He told her that he would not follow her down, not yet. He understood, standing at that threshold, in that deep and breathing quiet, that his time was not now, that the world above still needed tending, that he still had long, slow seasons of walking and watching and being present to what had been made. He understood it the way you understand, Sometimes that a thing is simply not yet time, not with sorrow, but with a quiet acceptance, the kind that settles in the chest like warmth, not cold. He stayed for a little while at the threshold, just resting in the nearness of her, in the sense of her peace, in the knowledge that she was whole and still, and deeply resting in the land of soft shadow, in the deepest and quietest room, held there as tenderly as sleep holds anyone who has finally let go. And then he turned. This is the gentle peak of the evening, just this, the turning. Not a wrench, not a tearing, only a turning slow and steady, back toward the light, back toward the world. He walked back the way he had come, and the world gentled around him as he rose, the air warming, the light returning in long, soft gradients from deep shadow to warm gray to the first pale suggestion of the sky. By the time he reached the upper world, it was dusk, that hour when everything goes soft and golden, and the day agrees to leave quietly and without argument. And the trees and the hills and the long shores all hold the last warmth of the light for a moment, just a moment before letting it go. He came to a river, a still, cool river running between low banks, its surface like glass in the dusk light, perfectly undisturbed. He stood at the edge of it and looked down at his own reflection, and the reflection looked back, and everything around it was soft and golden, the sky and the trees and the hills all folded into the water's surface, as if the whole world had leaned in to rest there. He waded in slowly. The water was cool, very cool, the way clear water always is in the late hours, and it received him without resistance, gathering around his feet, his ankles, his knees, cool and clean and gentle, moving past him in a slow and unhurried current that seemed to carry something away with it, not loss, not grief, but the particular heaviness that comes from long walking and a heart full of feeling, a heaviness that was not bad, but was ready to be set down. He stood there in the middle of the river in the dusk, and the water moved around him, and the last of the golden light lay across the surface, and the hills around him were very still, and everything was soft and quiet and at rest. He bathed, slowly and without hurry, with all the time in the world. The water ran clear over his hands and his face, and the water carried things gently away. The dust of the long road, the weight of the threshold, the ache of missing, all of it lifted and carried off in the cool, unhurried current, downstream and away, until what was left was only cleanness, only the good, cool weight of the river, only the warmth of the last light, and the breathing of the evening, and the deep and steady calm of a world that was whole and well and resting. He did not think about what had been or what would come. He was only here, in the river, in the dusk, in the great and patient quiet of the world he and Izanami had made together. And the river held him, and the evening held him, and somewhere in the land of soft shadow, she was held too, and all was well, and all had always been going to be well. The stars began to show, one by one, in the deepening sky above him. Faint at first, then steadier, finding their places in the dark, the way everything finds its place, slowly, without effort, simply by being themselves. And somewhere above all of this, not yet quite present, not yet quite here, but gathering, patient and warm and entirely sure of itself. A golden warmth that would one day be a goddess, that would one day be the sun, that would one day rise and fill the world with a light so generous and complete that all the valleys and all the hills and all the rivers would receive it without effort, without even reaching, simply by being still and open in the morning. That warmth was present even now, even here, even in the dusk, in the river, in the quiet evening of the world. It did not press or hurry. It only waited, golden and patient and already sure, the way morning is always already sure, even in the depths of the most gentle night. The river moved in the dark, and the stars moved above it, and Izanagi stood in the cool, still water for a long time, until the last edge of the golden light had faded from the sky, and the evening had become fully itself, dark and soft and deep, and full of the particular kindness that night has in a world that is safe. He did not need to go anywhere now. He did not need to carry anything. He had said what needed saying. He had stood at the threshold and been present and had turned back, and the turning back had been right and good and was complete. He waded slowly to the bank and sat there for a while in the cool grass, listening to the river, and the river spoke only in the language rivers have always spoken, which is no language at all but only the sound of water, moving soft and continuous and without meaning except presence, except here, except on and gently on. Nothing here needs finishing tonight. The land of soft shadow rested in its depths, and all who rested there were at peace, and the world above rested in its own particular peace, and the river rested in its banks, and the hills rested beneath the stars, and even the mist that had always been at the edges of things was resting, only barely moving, folding and refolding itself in the long, unhurried way of things that have nowhere to be. Let that be enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. You don't need to keep any of this. Not the river's name, not the road to the threshold, not the words that were spoken across it. None of it requires your memory. It is already held, the way all old stories are held, not in any one mind, but in the air itself, in the quiet beneath the quiet, in the deep and patient dark where things rest when they are done. The world is resting now. All the young rivers and the young hills and the young trees standing in the young dark. All of it is resting, breathing slowly, letting the night be the night, letting the silence be the silence, asking nothing of the morning that hasn't come yet, and asking nothing of you. Chapter 3. The River and the Three Lights. You may remember the river from before. It was here, just here, in this same still place where the evening light falls in long, untroubled ribbons, that Izanagi came when the grief of his farewell had grown too large to carry any further. He had walked back from the threshold of Yomi, the quiet land of soft shadow, where Izanami had gone, fading gently the way a lamp fades when its oil is spent. He had spoken his tender words at the threshold. He had turned, not with any violence, not with any tearing, only the quiet turning of someone who knows when a goodbye has been said. And then he had walked, alone, through the cooling of the afternoon, until the trees opened and the river was there before him, still and glass-surfaced, holding the whole sky. He had lowered himself into the water, not in any hurry, the way a person lowers themselves into rest when they are very tired and the rest is finally here. That was where we left him at the end of the last chapter. Standing in the river in the dusk, the water coming up around him, cool and patient, the sky reflected beneath his feet, as though he stood inside the sky itself, not above it. And the river received him as rivers do, without comment, without question, with only that steady and unhurried presence that moving water has always had. The current turned around him. The light drifted. The evening settled lower over the trees. He stood very still, and the water began, very slowly, to carry things away. It is a quiet thing, the way a river washes. There is nothing you would see, watching from the bank in the low amber light, nothing dramatic or swift, only the water folding itself around a still figure, only the evening and the current, and the slow release of something that had been held for a very long time. The grief of the farewell, the long walk down to the edge of the quiet land, the long walk back, all of it moved out through him like sediment loosening from a riverbed, carried away downstream in water too clear to see. He washed his hands first. The coolness of the water was steady and kind, and from the washing, very softly, a kami was born, one of those gentle spirits of the middle rivers, the watchers of clean flow, and it rose out of the surface like a curl of mist and drifted away downstream into the evening. And he did not watch it go because it was already part of the river, and the river was already part of everything. He washed his arms. The water darkened for a moment around him and then cleared. He washed his shoulders. He washed the long day from his throat, from the back of his neck, from all the tender places where tiredness lives. And the river continued its quiet work, and the sky above him deepened, that soft, indefinable deepening that happens in the last long minutes before a sky turns from pale blue to something darker, and the first suggestion of stars appeared somewhere very far above. Not yet stars, only the faintest brightening pinpoints in the haze of the dusk, the way stars always appear, not arriving exactly, but revealing themselves slowly, as though they had been there all along, waiting for the light to soften enough to let them through. He turned his face to the sky. He was not thinking of anything in particular. He was only breathing, the way people breathe when the difficult thing is over, and the body finally remembers how. Then he brought his hands to his face. He cupped the water in his palms, cool and still for just a moment, that held moment before water finds its level, and he brought it up to his eyes and let it run. And from washing his left eye, something came. It did not arrive like lightning. It did not arrive like a trumpet or a shout, or any of the stories that speak of greatness, as though greatness must always be loud. It arrived the way the first light of morning arrives, gradually, gently, beginning at the edges, a warmth before a brightness, a color before a shape, something soft and gold and tremendous unfolding out of the water like a flower opening in slow time. She was Amaterasu, the sun, the great illuminator, the one whose light the world had been leaning toward through all the long making of things, through all the mist and the spear stirring and the island building, and the quiet grief, the warmth that had been present as a thread, as a gathering, as a golden unnamed promise, humming at the edges of Ok. Each earlier chapter, finally, now, fully arrived. She stood in the river beside him, and she was radiant. Not the harsh radiance of noon, nothing blinding or demanding. The radiance of the first hour of morning, when the light is still golden and low, and the world has only just remembered that it is day. A soft light, a warm light, the kind of light that falls through a window and pools on the floor and makes a room feel for a moment like it contains something more than furniture and walls, like it contains something quiet and kind and safe. She was the color of late afternoon on water. She was the color of honey in a jar held up to a lamp. She was the warmth that the cold knows it is missing. She was everything that had been unnamed and gathering and waiting, and she was here now, here in the river, her light spreading softly across the surface of the water and the dark trees and the sky above, touching everything without asking anything of it. Izanagi looked at her for a long, still moment. He did not speak. There was nothing to say that the light was not already saying. Then he brought his hands to his face once more, and the cool river water ran across his right eye. And from that washing came Tsukuyomi, the moon, the quiet counter, the one who measures the long nights in silver. He was cooler than his sister, and paler, and his light was a different kind of light, the light that falls on a sleeping field, on a garden when everyone has gone inside, on the surface of water in the deep of the night when the world is at its most itself. His light did not warm the way hers did. It illumined. It made edges visible in the dark without ever quite making anything bright. He was the companion of all the hours that his sister did not keep, and he stood in the river with a calm and steady presence, his light a soft silver that moved across the water and touched the darkness without diminishing it. Izanagi looked at his son, for they were his children now, both of them, born from this gentle washing in the evening river, and felt something he had not expected to feel so soon after a farewell: gratitude. A wide, unguarded, exhausted gratitude, the kind that comes when you realize the world is not finished, that something good is still arriving, that the making of things is not over, but is only at every moment continuing. He lowered his hands a third time. The water ran across his nose, and from that washing came Susanoo, the wind, the wide breathing of the seas, the one who moves through the open spaces between the sky and the water. Susanoo arrived as a breath of moving air along the surface of the river, a scent of salt and distance and the open horizon, the kind of air you sometimes feel in the evening, near the shore when the land is beginning to cool and the sea is still warm, and the two begin their gentle exchange of temperature and smell. He was not still the way his siblings were still. He moved. He was the movement of things, the slow turn of weather, the unhurried crossing of clouds, the long, easy passage of wind through the grass of a wide field in the late afternoon. But tonight he was gentle. He moved through the riverside trees like a permission, not a disturbance, and the leaves turned softly at his passing, and the surface of the river showed only the faintest, most pleasant rippling, as though the water were breathing. The three of them stood together in the last of the evening light, the golden warmth of the sun, the silver quiet of the moon, the slow salt breath of the wind. The river moved around all three of them, unhurried, carrying nothing away now because there was nothing left to carry. Izanagi looked at his children in the fading light, and something in him was very quiet and very full. He thought about the world as it was, the islands lying still and green in the wide sea, the kami of the rivers and mountains and the slow-growing forests, the pillar at the center of Onogoro, the great and gentle weight of everything that had been made, and he thought about what it still needed, and he understood. He spoke to Amaterasu, his voice low and warm, the voice of someone speaking in a room where everything is already at rest. He told her the high plane of heaven was hers. Takamagahara, the great luminous expanse above the world, where the light lives, where the morning begins its long and patient work of waking things. That was her domain. The day was hers, and all the hours of growing and brightening, and the slow gold turn from morning to afternoon to the long amber ending. Let her light fall over all of it. Let the world below be warmed. She received this with a stillness that was not indifference, but something deeper, the stillness of something that has always known what it was, and has only been waiting for the name. He spoke to Tsukuyomi, the moon, and told him. The night was his. All the long and silver hours, the counting of time in darkness, the cool light that kept vigil over sleeping fields and sleeping creatures, and the slow turning of the world in its own quiet depths. Let him move through those hours with his pale lantern and his patient mathematics. Let him be the light that is enough, when enough is all that is needed. And he spoke to Susanoo the wind and told him, the seas were his, and the wide moving air between the sky and the water, the whole breathing middle distance of the world. Let him wander as winds do, not without purpose, but with a purpose that only the wind understands, which is to move and to carry and to connect, to bring the smell of distant shores to landlocked places, to move the seeds of things and the rain of things and the warm currents of things from one quarter of the world to another. Each of them received their realm like a sleeper receiving a warm blanket, settling into it, releasing the last of any tension, becoming what they were. The river moved around Izanagi still, cool and unbothered, and the evening had deepened now into the first true purple of the coming night. There was a moment, and it is worth holding for a breath, the way you hold a candle close to see it clearly, when all three lights were in the sky at once, or nearly in the sky, nearly together. The sun still low on the horizon, her gold just barely present, and the moon already risen on the other side, silver and new, and between them, the wide salt-scented air of Susanoo moving softly through the world. For just that one evening hour, that pause at the edge of dusk, when the day has not quite yielded and the night has not quite arrived, the three of them were present together, and the world held them all. It was very beautiful. It was the kind of beautiful that does not require you to say anything about it, the kind that simply happens around you. While you are standing somewhere quiet, and you feel it in your chest like a low warm note, and you do not need to name it. There was also, in the long years that followed, one small and gentle parting. Amaterasu had sent her brother Tsukuyomi, the moon, on an errand once to visit Ukimochi, the goddess of food and nourishment, and something passed between them in that meeting that left Amaterasu troubled in a way she could not quite smooth away. She was not angry exactly. She was not cold. She simply found, when she thought about it, in the way that one sometimes thinks about a small persistent difficulty, that she could not quite arrange herself to keep the same hours as her brother any longer. And so, with the quiet deliberateness of someone who has made a private decision, she turned her face, not away from him, but toward other hours. She claimed the day wholly and warmly, and let him have the night wholly and coolly, and where they had once moved through the sky together, they now moved through it in sequence, the sun departing as the moon arrived, the moon fading as the sun returned, each sovereign in their own long hours. They met still at the soft edges. At dusk, when the gold of her going and the silver of his coming briefly overlapped, they were almost together again. At dawn, in the pale interstitial light before the morning fully declared itself, they were almost together again. Two people who keep different hours, two kinds of light that have learned how to share a sky. There was no bitterness in it. There was only the world as it arranged itself, gently, over time. Day and night settling into their long and ancient alternation, each one making the other possible, each one resting while the other worked, the whole turning of things going on and on and on in its slow, unhurried, trustworthy way. The river stilled. Izanagi waded to the bank and stood in the evening air while the water ran from him, and the warmth of his daughter's first light settled over the trees and over the water and over the wide darkening sky. The moon had come up over the far hills, quiet and round, and Susanoo moved softly through the grass of the riverside, barely a breath, barely more than the smell of a distant sea. The world had its keepers now. It did not feel like a grand arrangement, standing there in the dusk. It felt the way it feels when the last necessary thing of the day has finally been done, and the evening opens up around you, unhurried and wide, and all you need to do is stand in it for a moment before you sleep. The sun's golden light moved slowly down the sky, not disappearing but easing, the way warmth eases out of a stone that has been sitting in the sun all afternoon, long and slow, and still present even in the cooling. Amaterasu moved toward her own horizon, Her light stretched long across the water, warm and amber and unhurried, and the shadows of the trees grew long with her, and the moon came on, silver and gentle, silver and sufficient. The sky above the river deepened to that blue that is almost purple, that blue that belongs to no hour but the one between, and the first stars appeared, real stars now, not suggestions, small and steady and very far away, keeping their own kind of vigil. Nothing needed to happen now. The story breathed out. The river moved. The wind moved softly through the riverside grass, and then was still again, or nearly still, the way Susanoo was still when he was at his most content, not absent, only very quiet, only resting in his own wide home of sea and sky. Izanagi sat down at the water's edge. He did not need to go anywhere. The making was not finished. It would go on for a very long time, because making things is what the world does, continuously and without hurry. But enough was made now that it could go on by itself for a while. The sun would rise. The moon would keep its slow rotation. The wind would move through the grasses and the far-off waters. The islands would lie green and still in the sea, the rivers running down through them in all their silver threads, the forests slow and patient on the hillsides, the small ordinary kami of mossy stones and morning dew, and the sound rain makes on leaves doing their quiet work without any assistance. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Chapter 4. The Meeting of Sun and Storm. You may remember how things stood when last we rested here. The three great kami had been given their realms at the edge of a still river in the dusk, born from a washing, from water, and the slow release of grief, from a father standing in the cool current and feeling the world beginning again. Amaterasu had risen from the washing of a left eye, golden and radiant and warm. Tsukuyomi had come from the right eye, silver and measured and serene. Susanoo had come from the breath across the nose, a salt wind, a wide movement, the long untroubled passage of air across an open sea. The sun had gone to Takamagahara, the high plain of heaven, and made it hers. The moon had taken his long silver hours and gone to do his slow and patient work of counting the nights. Susanoo had been given the seas and the wide-breathing world between the sky and the water, all that open, wind-moved distance. And he had gone there, or nearly gone there. The way Susanoo went anywhere was the way weather goes, not all at once, not on a schedule, but moving as things move when they are large and unhurried, and following their own gradients, their own long, quiet sense of where they need to be. He had been drifting toward his sea kingdom for some time, but something had slowed him, something he was carrying, the way weather carries things, not deliberately, not with any plan, but simply because carrying is what weather does, because a thing that large and that soft-edged cannot help but gather into itself whatever it passes through, and hold it, and move it slowly to the place it finally rests. What he was carrying was this, the thought of his mother, Izanami, who had faded long ago now into the deep quiet of Yomi, the deepest room in a long and gentle house. Who was there still, in that soft shadow, resting in the way that things rest when they have become part of the earth itself and no longer need to move? Susanoo had not been there for her going. He had been born after, born from a washing in a river, from water that had already released so much. But the knowledge of her was in him the way the smell of deep water is in a sea wind, not chosen, not remembered, only present, a heaviness that was not grief exactly, more like the low sky feeling before rain, a fullness pressing gently on the world from above. He wanted to say goodbye, or not quite goodbye, She was not gone the way gone means finished. She was the way a sleeping city is gone, present and dark and very still, full of something that is only resting. He wanted to say something in the direction of her, to acknowledge the weight, to let it be acknowledged, to do what people do when a loss is too large to speak and too real to ignore, and all they can manage is to stand for a moment and let themselves feel it without turning away. And before he went to his sea kingdom and became what he was, the breath of the world's wide middle distance, the salt wind, he wanted first to say goodbye to his sister. He turned his long, slow face toward the high plane of heaven, and he began to rise. It was Amaterasu who felt it first. She was doing what she always did in those long and unhurried heavenly mornings, moving through the light-filled fields of Takamagahara with the easy authority of someone who knows that everything in her domain is in its proper order and that the work of the day is already doing itself. The way sunrise does not need to be supervised, but simply happens. Goldenness, spreading across the world below in long, warm waves, each field and river and hillside receiving it in turn, patient and unhurried. The air changed. Not violently. Nothing in this part of the story moves violently. Nothing has a sharp edge. Nothing comes without warning. It was a change the way the afternoon changes when a cloud moves over the sun. A softening, a slight lowering of the light. A new quality in the air that was neither worse nor better, only different. The way one kind of weather is different from another, without either of them being wrong. She raised her face and looked out across the wide, luminous country. Far off, very far, at the edge of her sky, where the high plane of heaven begins its long slope down toward the sea, there was a gathering. A darkness, but the word darkness is not quite right, because it was not the absence of light, but rather the presence of something that was not light. A heaviness, a blue-gray moving thing, the kind of sky that forms over open water when the atmosphere is doing its private work of balancing pressures and temperatures, when the air is full and has nowhere to go and is only waiting for the moment it can release itself. Susanoo was coming, and Amaterasu, who knew her brother the way the sky knows the weather, not always what it will do, but always what it is, understood immediately what it meant and what it did not mean. It did not mean danger. It did not mean harm. It meant only that her brother was coming with his weight upon him, with the full feeling of everything he was carrying, and that the air around him could not help but reflect this, the way still water reflects whatever moves above it. She walked to meet him. This is the thing that matters and is easy to miss. She walked out to meet him. She did not wait. She did not brace herself. She simply moved, with her golden warmth moving with her, the light coming long and steady from her as she walked across the fields of heaven toward where her brother was rising, over the far edge of the sky, blue-gray and slow, and carrying his heaviness like a cloak. He came over the horizon the way a weather front comes, gradually the leading edge of him arriving first, a cool breath that moved through the grasses of the high plain in a single long wave, a rolling, a gentle bowing of everything it touched. Then the shadow of him came, the softening of Amaterasu's light, not into darkness, but into something more like the diffuse and pearly brightness of a cloudy day. When the sun is still there, but spread across the whole of the sky, rather than concentrated in one place. And then he was there. He stood before her, if stood is the right word for something that was also moving, that was also wind and salt, and the long, slow drift of a great pressure front through the upper air. And he was very large and very gentle and very heavy with what he carried. She looked at him. He was the smell of the sea. He was the low roll of distant thunder that is so far away it is almost comfortable, a sound the chest feels more than the ears hear. He was the gray-blue color of deep water before rain. He was her brother. "You are going," she said, not a question. "To the sea," he said. His voice was the sound of wind moving through tall grass in the early morning, a low and steady and unhurried sound. "But I wanted to come here first, to see you." And then he told her what he carried, not in long sentences, in the way the sea speaks, which is to say, in rhythm, in a low and rolling motion, each thing arriving and receding, the important things said simply. He missed the mother he had not known. He was going to his kingdom now, to his wide and moving home, but the going felt incomplete without first acknowledging what was missing in him, what had always been missing, the soft, quiet place that Izanami had left in everything when she went into the deep earth to rest. Amaterasu listened. She had her own version of this, she knew, her own way of carrying the same quiet absence. She kept it stored in a part of the golden warmth of her, a place where the warmth ran deeper and more serious, a place that knew what tenderness was because it had learned it in the presence of a loss that was too large to be called a loss, and so was instead called simply the nature of things, the way light and shadow are the nature of things, neither one the enemy of the other. She put out her hand, or the gesture that served for a hand in that country of light and weather and high, clear air, and she touched the edge of her brother's heaviness. And he let her. And then, because they were kami, and because kami have a way of making things real that humans make only in the mind, and because the meeting of sun and storm has always been generative rather than merely dramatic, something happened between them that was simple and beautiful and deserved a moment of attention before the story moved on. They made something together. It was not a ceremony, not a contest, not any kind of struggle. It was the way any weather meeting makes something, the way warm and cool air coming together make clouds, make the soft geometries of water, vapor and light that move across a sky and are neither one nor the other, but something new. Amaterasu, her warmth present and unhurried, and Susanoo, his deep water weight present and unhurried, simply occupied the same place in the high plain for a while. And where they were together, soft kami formed. Small presences, gentle ones, the kami of the moment just before rain arrives, which is its own kind of beautiful. The kami of the light that comes sideways through a cloud's edge. The kami of the smell of coming weather, which is the smell of the world about to receive something it needs. 5 of them, perhaps, or 7. The number does not matter. They rose out of the meeting like mist rises from water in the morning, slowly, without effort, and then they drifted away across the high plain and over the edge of the sky, and became part of the long, patient story of the world. This was the warmth at the center of the chapter. Hold it for a moment. The sun and her storm brother, standing together in the light that was also his softening of it, making something gentle out of the meeting of their natures, neither of them trying, neither of them performing, only being what they were in proximity to each other, and the world being richer for it. It was the kind of thing that happens in the high places of old stories, the kind of thing that is easy to drift past if you are not paying attention, and it does not matter at all if you drift past it. It will have happened. It will still be there, in the story's country, whenever you think of it. Then Susanoo went to say his goodbye. This is the part where the story grows softer and slower, because Susanoo, who had said what needed saying and had made what needed making, turned back toward the world below and began gradually to release what he was carrying. And a release, for someone who is weather, looks like weather. It was not a rampage. That word belongs to a sharper kind of story. What it looked like, from the quiet fields of Takamagahara, was simply a passing, the kind of sky that moves through in the afternoon and troubles things briefly and then moves on, the kind of weather you have seen many times in your own life. A wind moving through a field of rice, bending the long stalks all in one direction before they spring slowly back, and then the field is still again, as it was, a little wetter, a little richer, no worse for it. A rain troubling the gardens of heaven, troubling them gently, the way rain troubles anything gently when there is nothing it means to break, only the natural insistence of water finding its way down. A wind through the great halls, moving through open corridors, in the long buildings of the high plain, stirring things that were on tables, lifting a hanging cloth and letting it settle again. A sound in the roof beams that was not frightening, only the sound of a large and unhurried presence moving through a space not quite built for it. Distant, all of it distant. If you were standing far enough away, and in the way of these stories, you are far enough away, you are warm and still and resting, and the weather is on the far side of the hills, it would have sounded something like the weather of a late summer afternoon. The low roll of it, the softness of rain on leaves heard from inside a room, the movement of things being moved and then becoming still again. It did not last very long. Weather never lasts as long as it seems like it will when it is happening. You know this. You have waited out enough storms of your own to know that even the most imposing sky eventually exhausts itself, moves on, leaves the air washed and soft and smelling of distance, the world after rain, the stillness that returns. That was Susanoo, releasing his heaviness, saying goodbye to Izanami in the only language available to him, which was the language of atmosphere, of pressure, of the slow letting down of something that had been held aloft for a very long time. And then the weather moved on, over the edge of the high plain and down toward the sea, where Susanoo would go to be what he was. The salt breath of the world, the wide moving air, the one who carries things from one shore to another without being asked and without needing thanks, who makes the sea's surface into a living thing, who moves the seeds of distant flowers into gardens that had not expected them. He went toward his kingdom, and behind him the high plain was quiet and still, and a little more golden than before, the way the world is always more golden for a moment after a rain, the light returning with a warmth it had been withholding, the sky that washed out blue that belongs to the hour after weather, open and soft and extremely large. Amaterasu stood in the returning light and felt it on her, the warmth of her own radiance, returning to its proper reach now that the softening of Susanoo's presence had moved away down the sky. The long fields of heaven glowing again in their ordinary way, which was a very beautiful way. The distant sound of the weather her brother carried, already receding, already softening into the general murmur of the sea realm at the edge of the world. She was tired. This is a thing that is allowed. Even the sun can be tired. Even the warmth that holds the world in its long and patient illumination is held itself by something that needs, from time to time, to rest. She had spent the morning doing the work of the sky. She had walked out to meet her brother in his heaviness. She had made something new with him. She had watched his weather move through and move on. All of it good, all of it right, all of it what needed doing, and all of it in its own quiet way, asking something of her, the way every good thing asks something of the one who gives it. She was tired in the way the afternoon is tired before it becomes evening. That long, soft, golden kind of tiredness that is not distress, but simply the natural end of a day of effort. The warmth going out of things slowly the way it always does. The light growing amber and low, the shadows stretching. She thought about resting. At the edge of the high plain, where the great fields ended and the sky began its long slope down toward the world, there was a cave. It had been there as long as anything had been there. A cave in the hillside of heaven, its entrance smooth and rounded, its interior a deep and unhurried dark, the kind of dark that is not frightening, because it is not empty but is instead very full of the quiet that is the underside of all brightness, the rest that makes the light possible. She had known about it for a long time. She walked toward it slowly, not fleeing anything, not in fear of anything. The weather had passed. Her brother was already on his way to the sea, his heaviness released, his wide salt self returning to the place it was most itself. The high plain was golden and still and fine. Everything was fine. She was only tired, and the cave was there, and sometimes the right response to tiredness is simply to rest without apology. She reached the entrance. She stood for a moment in the soft amber of her own last light, the warmth of her falling long across the threshold, and then being absorbed into the dark beyond it. Then she stepped inside. The cave received her the way sleep receives anyone who has finally stopped resisting it, without ceremony, without demand, with only the quiet and the coolness and the kind of darkness that is not an absence, but a presence, a deep and patient waiting. From outside, the light of Takamagahara changed. It did not go out. That word is too sharp for what happened. It dimmed, the way a lamp dims when you lower the wick. Slowly, evenly, the warmth still present but quieter. The golden quality of the high plains light becoming something softer and more diffuse, something that made you look up and register, without alarm, that the air had changed. Amaterasu reached for the stone. It was smooth beneath her hand. She had not expected it to be quite so smooth, almost worn, as though it had been put in place before, as though the cave had a memory of being closed before and was ready to be closed again, patient and prepared. She moved it gently across the entrance, not a ceiling, a closing. The way you pull a blanket up over your shoulders when you are already mostly asleep. Not a barricade, just a drawing in, a turning toward the warmth that is already there. The stone settled. The light from outside thinned to a line at the edge, then faded entirely. The cave was quiet. She was quiet. Outside, the world grew soft, not dark, not yet, not entirely, because the light of Amaterasu had not gone, but had only gone inside, and the world was lit still in the way it is lit before a storm. That even, sourceless, diffuse brightness that seems to come from everywhere at once and casts no shadows, and makes every color slightly more itself. The green of the heaven fields more purely green, the white of the high clouds more purely white, the distant glimmer of the sea below more purely silver. The kami of the high plain moved through the fields quietly. Some of them stood for a while at the edge of the sky and looked out across the wide world below. The rice fields far down on the warm earth, where Suzanu's passing had stirred the stalks and then let them settle. The gardens of the earth realm, where the rain had moved through, and now the sky was washed. The halls with their roof beams that had spoken in the wind and were now still and silent again. The hanging cloths lying smooth. Everything that had been troubled was no longer troubled. This is the nature of passing weather. It passes. The small kami born from the meeting of sun and storm had already drifted away to their places in the world. The kami of pre-rain light settling into the moment just before an afternoon shower. The kami of cloud edge brightness taking up its position at the rim of every cloud that would ever cast its sideways light across a field. They were doing what they were for. The meeting had been fruitful, the way all true meetings are fruitful, the way something is always made when two different presences share the same space long enough. The world waited, not anxiously. This is the thing to understand about the world in this part of the story. It was not frightened. It had seen weather before. It knew in whatever way a world knows things, in the grain of its hills and the direction of its rivers, and the memory in its deep soil, that the sun was resting, and that resting things return. It was the kind of waiting that is more like patience than longing, more like trust than need, more like the feeling of evening coming on when you know the morning will come after it, when the darkening of the sky is not a diminishment but a completion, the last part of a full day settling into the last hours it needs before beginning again. Nothing needs finishing tonight. That is worth saying softly and without rushing. Nothing needs finishing tonight. The sun is resting. The storm has passed. The world is lit in a soft and sourceless way that is enough, that is more than enough, that has a quality all its own, the quality of patience, the quality of the held breath between one beautiful thing and the next. Let it be enough. Let the dim and golden and diffuse light of Takamagahara be enough for now. The fields growing a little softer in the absence of their goddess's direct warmth. The colors going down a half tone, a gentle lowering. The whole of the high plain breathing out as though it too had been holding something, and has now, finally, been given permission to release it. The cave is still. The stone is smooth across the entrance. Inside, Amaterasu rests, and her warmth is still present, still radiating slowly through the rock, the way warmth always lingers in stone, long after the direct sun has moved on. A memory of heat, a patient continuation. She is not gone. She is only resting. This is the difference, and the world knows the difference. Chapter 5. The Quiet Cave. The world had grown quiet, and it had happened so gently that no one could say precisely when it began. There was still light. That is the first thing to understand about the dimness that had settled across Takamagahara since Amaterasu drew her stone across the cave's mouth. There was still light, because the warmth of the sun goddess does not vanish the way a candle goes out when you blow it. It changes, as warmth changes when its source moves away, as a room changes in the hour after the fire has burned low, still full of heat, but the heat of memory now. The long, slow releasing of what the stones and the beams and the deep earth have gathered over the course of a day. The high plain breathed it. The wide fields held it. The distant clouds carried it in their color, which was neither silver nor gold, but something that lived between them. A pale blue-gray luminescence, calm and even, spreading without shadow across the whole of the heavenly country. A house at 3 a.m. has this quality. You may know it, that sourceless, diffuse light that belongs to the hours when the world is not quite awake and not quite asleep, when the streets are empty but not lonely, when the silence has weight and warmth and the particular softness of things that are only resting. This was the quality of the high plain now, not diminished, only changed. The rivers of heaven still moved, though more slowly, their sound gentle and low. The trees of the high plain were still, the way trees are still in the hours before dawn, not frozen, not rigid, but deeply at rest, their leaves folded and quiet, their roots drawing patiently from the still dark ground. The tall grasses of the heavenly fields lay soft, their long blades silver in the diffuse light, bending very slightly in a breath of air, so gentle it barely knew itself as wind. And across this quiet, unhurried world, the kami were making their way toward the cave. They came the way neighbors come when someone they love is resting, and they want to be near without waking, not in a crowd, not in any hurry. They came in ones and twos and small quiet clusters along the paths that wound between the grassy hillocks of the high plain, their presence gentle, their voices low. Some of them had been nearby when the stone was drawn across. The small kami of the heaven fields, the kami of the high rivers, the kami whose work was the patient maintenance of all the beautiful small things of Takamagahara. The dew on the morning grasses, the soft calls of the long crowing roosters before dawn, the movement of pale clouds across the wide upper sky. Others had come from farther out, drawn not by any urgency but by the same feeling that draws people together on overcast evenings, the feeling that warmth is best shared, that a gentle waiting is better done in company, that the soft ache of missing something beloved is easier to carry when it is carried with others. They missed the warm golden light. They missed it the way you miss the sun on a long gray day, not desperately, not with any edge of fear, but with a slow and patient awareness, a sweetness beneath the longing that came from knowing the light was real, that it had warmed them before and would warm them again, that this dimness was not an ending, but a pause in something very long. They could remember the feeling of it, the way Amaterasu's radiance fell across the fields of heaven in the late morning, honey warm and even, the way it lay long and amber across the hillsides in the afternoon, the way it made the rivers of Takamagahara into moving gold. They held those memories gently, the way you might hold a smooth stone you have carried for a long time, feeling the warmth that has gathered in it from being close to you. They gathered near the cave mouth without pressing toward it. There was a wide stretch of level ground there, where the hill curved gently around to make a shallow bowl in the hillside, and it was here that the kami settled, finding places in the soft grass, sitting or standing in the quiet companionable way of people who have been somewhere long enough to be comfortable, who have no particular agenda beyond presence. Small fires were lit, not large ones, nothing that crackled or spat, but low fires in carefully made rings of river stone, fires that burned steadily and orange and warm, their light falling in soft circles across the gathered kami and the ground around them and the face of the hill with its smooth stone drawn close across the cave's round mouth. The light of those fires was the warmest thing in the world just then. It was a small warmth, nothing like the warmth of the sun, and yet it had its own quality, the intimate quality of firelight, which is the warmth of hands and nearness, and the ancient feeling of being together in the dark with people you trust. The shadows moved softly in the small wind. The kami sat in their circles of orange warmth, and some of them spoke in low voices, and some of them were silent, and all of them were easy, untroubled, patient as the fields were patient, as the whole of the dim world was patient. It was Omoi Kane who first put words to what they might do. Omoi Kane, the quiet god of good thinking, whose gift was not the sudden bright flash of a new idea, but the slow and careful turning of a problem in his hands, the way a craftsman turns a piece of wood to find its grain, to understand what it already wants to become. He was not large or dramatic. He sat near one of the small fires, and he was quiet for a long time, and his quietness was a particular kind of quietness, attentive, unhurried, full of something working slowly beneath the surface, the way a river works beneath ice in winter, moving and shaping in the dark. He turned the question over. Not, how do we bring Amaterasu out? That was not the right question, and Omoi Kane knew it the way he knew all things, which was by feeling the shape of what was wrong with a question, until the right question became clear by its absence. Amaterasu was not lost. She was not trapped. She was resting, and resting is not a problem to be solved, but a state to be respected. The question was only how to let her know, when she was ready, that the world was glad to receive her, that her warmth was wanted and missed, and would be welcome back without demand. How do you welcome someone who is resting? He thought about this for a long time, and the fire burned low, and was fed another small branch and burned again, and the kami around him sat in their comfortable quiet, and did not press him, because they understood that Omoikane thought the way the seasons change, not quickly, not on anyone's schedule, but surely, each thought arriving when it was ready, when the right conditions had assembled themselves without being forced. And then, slowly, he began to speak. His voice was low, and it suited the night. He spoke the way someone speaks when they are sharing something they have just found and are still examining it themselves. Not pronouncing, not instructing, only offering. What he offered was this: let them prepare a welcome, not a demand, not a summons, a preparation only. The careful, loving act of making ready, of arranging things in the way that says here, when you come, you will find something worth coming to. The rest would belong to Amaterasu. The rest was not theirs to plan. First, he said, the roosters. There were roosters on the high plain, long crowing roosters whose calling before dawn was one of the sounds Takamagahara had always made, one of its ordinary beauties, the sounds that meant the world was moving in its proper rhythm. Let them be gathered near the cave, he said, and let them be ready to sing when the time came, their deep sustained calls filling the air around the hillside the way they filled the early morning, not to wake Amaterasu, not to summon her, only to give the air the quality of just before dawn, the quality of arrival and beginning that their voices carried naturally, that they had always carried. Some of the kami rose quietly to do this, moving off into the dim fields with the unhurried ease of people who know exactly where the roosters roost and how to approach them gently. Second, Omoikane said, the sakaki tree. The sakaki, a tree that grew in the gardens of the high plain, its leaves deep and glossy and evergreen, one of those plants that seems to belong equally to the ordinary world and to the world of sacred things, that has always been used to bridge the two, its dark leaves holding something of the forest's deep quiet and something of the sky's openness at once. Let one of the young sakaki trees be brought and planted near the cave mouth, he said, and dressed with care, with the small beautiful things that would catch the diffuse light of the dimmed world and give it back again transformed. The magatama, someone knew where they were kept. The magatama, curved jewels, comma-shaped, each one a smooth arc of polished stone that seemed to hold the light rather than reflect it, to gather brightness inside itself, and let it move slowly from one curve to the next. They were strung on lengths of silk, and the kami who brought them carried them carefully, their hands cupped around the jewels as though they were something living. When they were hung from the branches of the sakaki, they turned on their threads in the slight warm air from the fires, and each one caught the orange glow and held it, and then released it differently, now warmer, now cooler, now the color of honey in a glass jar held to a lamp, now the pale gold of late afternoon on water. The kami stood around the little tree and watched the jewels turn. It was a beautiful thing, a very small and quiet beautiful thing, the kind that does not announce itself, but simply is there when you look, the glossy dark leaves, and the turning jewels, and the firelight moving softly across all of it, and the hill behind with its smooth stone, and the dim blue-gray sky above, and the world resting all the way to its edges. White streamers were brought next, long pale lengths of cloth, soft as old linen, that were tied to the sakaki's higher branches and hung down through the lower ones, moving gently whenever the air moved, their whiteness the whitest thing in the gentle dark. Someone threaded more magatama between them. Someone else brought a small offering of rice, placed carefully at the base of the tree in a shallow bowl. The work was quiet. The hands were gentle. There was no hurry, and this unhurriedness was itself a kind of gift. The attention that only patience can give, the care that only comes when there is no deadline pressing. And then the mirror. It was bronze, and it was round, and it was large. The kind of large that takes two careful pairs of hands to carry, not awkwardly, but with ceremony, as though the object itself deserves to arrive with a certain deliberateness. Two kami carried it from the place where it was kept, walking slowly across the dim grass, and when they came into the circle of firelight, the mirror caught that light, and held it in a way the jewels had not. The jewels gave the light back in pieces, scattered and dancing. The mirror gathered the light and gave it back whole, a single round luminosity, warm and even, a reflected brightness that was, for a moment, the most generous thing in the world, a thing that had taken light from outside itself and offered it outward, unchanged, only enlarged. They hung the mirror from a branch of the sakaki tree, and the tree now held all three things: the magatama, turning on their threads, the white streamers, moving in the gentle air, and the great round mirror with its pooled warmth. The firelight fell across all of it together, and the little tree was transformed by its adornments into something that belonged equally to the ordinary world and to the world of ceremony, something that was simply and completely beautiful, the way things are when they have been prepared with love and without hurry. The kami stood back and looked at what they had made. This was the warm center of the night, this moment, the gathered quiet, the small fires burning steadily, the dressed tree with its jewels and its mirror and its pale streamers, the low voices and the careful hands and the shared work of preparation done well. Not for themselves, for her, for the warmth they missed and were not demanding back, only gently, lovingly, readying a welcome for whenever it was ready to be received. Something that is prepared with that kind of care becomes its own warmth. You may have felt this, the quality of a room that has been made ready for someone, where the light is on, and the table is set, and the fire is lit, and whoever the welcome is for has not yet arrived, but is nonetheless already there in some way, already present in the arrangement of things, already contained in the patience of those who love them. The cave was still, the stone was still, the world was still. But the hillside now held something different than it had before, the warm intention of a welcome, gently laid. The kami settled. One by one and slowly, without any signal or instruction, they found their places in the soft grass around the fires and arranged themselves for the waiting. Some sat with their backs against the gentle slope of the hillside and looked up at the diffuse blue-gray sky. Some lay down quietly, heads resting on folded arms, eyes open or closed, content simply to be present. The fires were tended with a light hand, fed only enough to keep them burning steadily, their orange warmth unchanged, their light moving softly across the gathered faces. The roosters had settled too. They had been brought to their places near the cave mouth and had arranged themselves with the calm authority of roosters who know their work and are not troubled by the waiting, perched on low stones and smooth branches, with their rich, rustled feathers settling around them, their eyes quiet in the dim light. They would call when calling was right. Not yet. For now they were still, and their stillness had its own fullness, the kind that belongs to things that are ready and are not impatient about it. The sakaki tree turned its jewels in the small night air. The mirror gathered its slow warmth. The white streamers moved and were still and moved again. Everything that needed doing had been done. This is a feeling that is rarer than it should be. The feeling of a thing completed, of effort rested, of hands that have worked quietly and well now, lying open and at ease. The kami knew this feeling. They sat in it the way you sit in warmth, without trying to hold it, only receiving it. And the world beyond the hillside was soft and patient in its long dim waiting. Far below, the earth realm rested. The rice fields lay still in the sourceless blue-gray light. The rivers ran quietly in their courses, their surfaces not catching the sun, because there was no sun to catch, only the diffuse even glow of a world that was lit without a source, illuminated from everywhere and nowhere, the way a cloudy sky illuminates a winter landscape. And this was fine. This was enough. The world had rested in this quality of light before and had not been diminished by it. The rivers still ran. The mountains stood. The deep earth held its warmth the way it always holds warmth, slowly, patiently, over the long course of hours. Nothing needs finishing tonight. The welcome is prepared. The tree is dressed. The fires are tending themselves in their low and steady way. The roosters are resting into their readiness. Omoikane has said what needed saying, and his quiet words are still moving through the gathered kami like warmth moves through stone, slowly, gently, reaching into the deeper places without hurry. And behind the smooth stone of the cave mouth, Amaterasu rests. She is not far. She is only inside, as you are only inside when you pull the covers around you and let the night do its work of restoring. The warmth of her is still present in the rock. You could press your hand to the hillside here and feel it, that slow, deep radiance, patient and sure. She is here. She is only resting. And all around the hillside the world has gathered, not to press her, not to insist, only to be near and to have prepared something beautiful for whenever she is ready. On low stones and smooth branches, with their rich, rustled feathers settling around them, their eyes quiet in the dim light, they would call when calling was right. Not yet, for now they were still, and their stillness had its own fullness, the kind that belongs to things that are ready and are not impatient about it. The sakaki tree turned its jewels in the small night air. The mirror gathered its slow warmth. The white streamers moved and were still and moved again. Everything that needed doing had been done. This is a feeling that is rarer than it should be, the feeling of a thing completed, of effort rested, of hands that have worked quietly and well now lying open and at ease. The kami knew this feeling. They sat in it the way you sit in warmth, without trying to hold it, only receiving it. And the world beyond the hillside was soft and patient in its long dim waiting. Far below, the earth realm rested. The rice fields lay still in the sourceless blue-gray light. The rivers ran quietly in their courses, their surfaces not catching the sun, because there was no sun to catch, only the diffuse even glow of a world that was lit without a source, illuminated from everywhere and nowhere, the way a cloudy sky illuminates a winter landscape. And this was fine. This was enough. The world had rested in this quality of light before, and had not been diminished by it. The rivers still ran. The mountains stood. The deep earth held its warmth the way it always holds warmth, slowly, patiently, over the long course of hours. Nothing needs finishing tonight. The welcome is prepared. The tree is dressed. The fires are tending themselves in their low and steady way. The roosters are resting into their readiness. Omoikane has said what needed saying, and his quiet words are still moving through the gathered kami, like warmth moves through stone, slowly, gently, reaching into the deeper places without hurry. And behind the smooth stone of the cave mouth, Amaterasu rests. She is not far. She is only inside, as you are only inside when you pull the covers around you and let the night do its work of restoring. The warmth of her is still present in the rock. You could press your hand to the hillside here and feel it. That slow, deep radiance, patient and sure. She is here. She is only resting. And all around the hillside the world has gathered, not to press her, not to insist, only to be near and to have prepared something beautiful for whenever she is ready. Let your shoulders settle. Let the last of the day's weight go, and let yourself go. Chapter 6. The Mirror and the Returning Light. Let yourself settle now, however you are lying, and let the breath come slower, slower, the way breath comes when the body already knows it is safe, and the mind is only just catching up. You have been here before, in this country between waking and sleep, and you know the way from here. There is nothing to arrive at tonight. There is nowhere to be but here, behind your own closed eyes, with the dark around you and the quiet of the room doing its soft work. You don't have to stay awake for any of this. That permission is real, and it is given freely. You can let these words become the sound of water in another room, present and warm, and asking nothing. And you can go wherever sleep is taking you, as soon as it asks. The story will be here. It holds itself the way the hills of that old country hold the warmth of a fire long after the fire has burned down. Slowly, in the deep places, without effort. Let the edges of the room go soft. Let the day be somewhere else now. Tonight we are going back to the hillside, to Takamagahara, the high plain of heaven, where the kami have been settled in the blue-gray patient dark, the little sakaki tree dressed in its jewels and pale streamers, the great round bronze mirror hung and waiting, the fires burning low and orange and steady. Everything has been prepared, and it has been prepared with love, and the preparation itself was already its own kind of warmth. Amaterasu is still behind her stone, but the roosters are awake, and the long welcome is about to begin. The hours before dawn on the high plain had their own quality of waiting, a waiting already leaning toward morning, with the particular texture of a world on the edge of something, though there was no hurry in it, only the sense of a very slow and gentle tilting, the way the sky begins to change long before the sun arrives, the darkness softening at the edges of itself in ways too gradual to name. The fires had burned through the night. They were lower now than they had been, fed through the quiet hours by the patient hands of kami who had sat beside their rings of river stone through the long, dim dark and tended the flames with the light attention of someone sitting with a sleeping friend. Present but unobtrusive, available but not pressing. The orange light moved softly across the grass, and the gathered kami, and the face of the hill, where the smooth stone was drawn across the cave's round mouth, its surface faintly warm even now, the warmth of the goddess seeping through its layers with the slow certainty of something that will not be rushed. The sky above was still blue-gray and sourceless. There were no sharp shadows on the hillside, no direction to the light, only the diffuse, even illumination of a world lit from everywhere at once, from the memory of warmth held in the clouds and the hillside and the deep earth below. A gentle light, a patient light, the kind that does not announce itself but simply persists, quietly, steadily, without needing to be thanked for it. The sakaki tree turned its jewels in a breath of air so slight it barely moved the pale streamers. The mirror was still. The kami were still. And then one of the roosters made a sound. Not his full voice yet. Only a low preparatory sound, the kind that belongs to the deep chest of a rooster who is gathering himself, who feels the first intimation of morning in his feathers and his hollow bones, and is simply, quietly, beginning to find it. It was barely anything at all. And yet, in the hush of the hillside, it moved through the gathered kami, the way warmth moves through a room when someone opens a door on a cold night. Welcome and real, the sense of something arriving. One by one, the kami turned their faces toward the cave mouth. The roosters called together as the earliest possible light began to ease into the world above the high plain. It was a deep sound, long and sustained, the sound that the fields of heaven had always woken to and would always wake to, a sound that meant, in the same wordless way, all deep body sounds mean things, that the world was still moving in its old and trusted rhythms. That morning was on its way. The calls rose and fell and overlapped in the warm air, filling the hollow bowl of the hillside the way water fills a basin, so that the whole space around the cave mouth was full of the feeling of just before dawn. The kami listened, and were still. And then Amenozume began to dance. She was the goddess of dawn and gentle mirth. Amenozume, who carried in her bearing something of the particular quality of early morning, when the body is soft and the mind has not yet put on its armor for the day. She wore her hair loosely, and her robes were simple and pale, and she moved to an open space before the cave mouth with the unhurried ease of someone who has been here many times before and knows exactly where the grass grows softest. She began. It was simpler than ceremony, and in its simplicity it was more beautiful. The kind of movement that comes when a person is fully at ease, when the feet find their own path, and the arms settle into their own arc, and the whole thing flows from some interior warmth, rather than from a plan. She moved slowly, each step placed with a quiet deliberateness, her robes turning softly around her as she turned, the pale cloth catching the firelight moving across her face and her loosened hair. Laughter came from the gathered kami, and it was the softest kind of laughter. Not the laughter of spectacle, not the laughter of a crowd watching something extraordinary, but the laughter that comes when something is simply, genuinely, unexpectedly warm. A sound that moved through the gathering, the way warmth moves through a room, passing from person to person, catching in a smile here and a quiet breath of delight there, building not to volume but to depth, so that the whole hillside was full of this gentle, golden, human sound. The sound of people who are glad. The sound of people who are, despite everything, at ease. The roosters called again between the long notes of the laughter. Amenozume moved through the space before the cave with her slow and easy steps, and her joy was unhurried, the kind that does not perform gladness, but simply is glad, that radiates warmth the way the sakaki tree's jewels radiated firelight. Softly, in all directions, changed from what came in. The kami around her were warmed by it. The fires seemed to know it, burning with a little more life, their orange light spreading a little more fully across the grass and the gathered faces. And behind the smooth stone of the cave mouth, something stirred. Not movement, not yet, only attention, the way attention stirs when something reaches through the ordinary quiet and touches a place that was not quite asleep. Amaterasu had been in her deep warm rest for a long time, and the quality of that rest had been without sound, without the smell of fires, without the low warmth of other presences on the other side of the stone, without the particular sweetness of laughter that is not laughing at something, but only laughing because the heart is full. All of this had found its way through the rock and the warm dark of the cave, the way sound finds its way through walls when you are nearly asleep, diffuse and soft and dream-colored, but present, present. She listened. The roosters called in their deep, sustained voices. Amanuzume's slow steps moved across the grass, and the kami laughed their quiet golden laughter, and the sound of it was so simply kind, so unmistakably the sound of gladness without demand, that curiosity stirred in Amaterasu the way the dawn stirs before the sun arrives. Slowly, from the inside out, a warmth becoming aware of itself. Why, she wondered, in the dim and resting way of someone who has been very still and is only now beginning to move toward waking, why would there be laughter and the sound of morning and the particular feeling of a gathering that is glad? The wondering was gentle. It did not press. It simply was there, the way a question is there when you have just woken from sleep, present but not demanding, turning slowly in the warmth like one of the magatama on its thread. She placed one hand very slowly against the inner surface of the smooth stone. It was still warm. She could feel the warmth of the fires on the other side, and the warmth of all those presences, and something else too. The warmth of something prepared and ready and waiting without urgency, a welcome that had been laid quietly down and was not pressing her to receive it, only existing, patient as the long fields of Takamagahara, patient as the deep earth that holds its warmth through the whole dark of winter and releases it again when the time is right. She eased the stone back. Just a sliver, the smallest possible opening, a breath of space between the stone and the cave mouth's edge. A thread of outside air came in, carrying the smell of the fires and the night grass and the distant upper sky. Through the opening came the sound of the roosters and the sound of the laughter and the warm, slow sound of Amanuzume's feet in the grass. And through the opening she called, softly, in a voice that was still thick with rest. "Why?" she asked. "Why is there joy and the sound of morning while the light sleeps away?" Amanuzume turned. Her voice when she answered was gentle and warm, the voice of someone who knows how to speak to one who is barely awake and does not want to startle them back into darkness. She said, "We rejoice because a light even more beautiful than the sun has come among us tonight, a light so lovely that we cannot help but be glad." There was a pause in which the roosters called once more, and the fires shifted softly in their rings of stone. Amaterasu wondered, in her slow and resting way, what such a light might be. She had not thought about light in the dark of the cave. She had only been the warmth in the rock, the deep, patient radiance of something resting rather than shining. She was simply herself, simply warm, simply resting. She eased the stone back a little further, and Amanuzume, her movements slow and unhurried, reached out one hand and tilted the great round bronze mirror toward the opening in the cave mouth. Amaterasu leaned out, and the mirror caught her. What she saw, what met her as she leaned into the thin opening of the cave mouth and looked toward the mirror, and the mirror looked toward her, was light, warm even, honey golden light, not sharp, not dazzling, not the light of noon or of brilliant summer, but the light of late morning on a still day, the light that pools on water and gathers in the curving neck of a jar of honey held up to a lamp, the light that is the color of welcome and warmth and the best of what the world can offer a tired and resting thing. She did not know it was herself. She had never seen herself before, not truly, not the whole of her own radiance gathered and returned to her from outside, unchanged. She had been light without ever standing in her own light, the way you stand in the light of a lamp, seeing it from the outside, understanding it as a thing that exists in the world rather than a thing that simply is. And so she leaned, and the warm golden light that poured from the opening of the cave met the mirror's round bronze face and came back whole, and Amaterasu looked at it and was held, softly transfixed, the way you are transfixed by the best kind of beauty, not startled, not overwhelmed, not taken by surprise in a way that quickens the heart, but simply stopped, gently and completely, by something that is exactly right. Something that says, "Here, this is what warmth looks like when it is fully itself, when it has not been dimmed or diffused or pressed through stone, when it is simply allowed to be." She was still looking when Ame no Tajikarao reached toward her. He was the gentle, strong god, Ame no Tajikarao, whose strength was not the strength of force, but the strength of steadiness, the kind that is most felt in the gentleness with which great power is held in check. He had been waiting quietly near the edge of the cave mouth, and when Amaterasu leaned out into the thin ribbon of outside air, he reached toward her slowly, the way you reach toward something beautiful and delicate that you do not want to startle, and he took her hand. His grip was warm and easy and sure. She looked at him, and he smiled, a warmth without condition, without demand, without anything in it but the simple gladness of someone who is glad to see you and whose gladness asks for nothing at all except to be present. He helped her step out, slowly, from the cave mouth into the open. Her foot met the grass of the hillside, and the dew on the grass was cool and real, and the air around her was the outside air, full of the smell of the fires, and the high plain, and the long night that was now, gently and without announcement, beginning to end. And another god, soft-handed, drew a shimenawa across the cave mouth behind her, a long, soft, sacred rope, pale and twisted, hung not as a barrier, but as a marker, a gentle tying back, the way you tie back a curtain so it will not swing closed again in the dark, the way you prop open a door so that what has opened can remain open, receiving the air, receiving the morning, held in its own welcome. The rope was the gentlest of boundaries, not a lock, not a closing, only a small and tender saying, "This opening is meant to stay open," and the light came back. It did not rush. It did not flood the world with sudden brilliance the way a lamp floods a dark room when someone throws open the door. It came the way light comes at dawn, which is to say it came slowly, so slowly that in any single moment you could not point to the change, but in the space of a breath and then another breath, and then the long, easy exhale. After that, the world was lighter and lighter still, and the blue-gray diffuse sourceless glow of the long patient night was warming at its edges, finding color, the pale grasses of the high plain beginning to hold their own green again, the surface of the rivers of Takamagahara catching something, glinting faintly, the distant clouds above the plain beginning to go from gray to silver to a soft pale gold. Amaterasu stood at the mouth of the cave, and her light was on the world. She was not doing anything. She was simply standing, simply present, simply herself outside the stone, and that was enough. It had always been enough, would always be enough, because her warmth was not something she produced with effort, but something she simply was, the way certain people are warm without trying to be warm, the way certain rooms are full of light because of the angle of their windows and the color of their walls, and the way they were built by someone who loved the light and thought about where it would fall. The warm golden light moved across the high plain in the long, low way of early morning. It moved across the grasses and the rivers and the hillsides, and the dressed sakaki tree with its magatama jewels and its pale streamers and its great round mirror now giving back not firelight, but something far more generous, the honey-warm radiance of the sun herself, returned and full, gathered and offered back whole in the mirror's round bronze face. The kami stood in the morning light and were quiet. Not the quietness of the waiting night, not the patient blue-gray quietness of all those hours of gentle preparation, but the quietness of something completed, the deep and easy stillness that comes when what has been waited for has arrived, when the longing has resolved itself without effort into presence, when the missing is over and what was missed is simply here, warm and real and unhurried. Some of them looked up. Some of them closed their eyes and turned their faces toward the warmth, the way you turn your face toward warmth on a cold morning, slowly, with the particular gratitude of a body that knows what it has missed and receives what it has missed without making a fuss about it, only receiving, openly, gladly, in the way of things that have been patient and are now permitted simply to be glad. The roosters called one last long call and were still. Menuzume stood in the open sunlight with her eyes closed and her arms soft at her sides, and her face held up toward the warmth, and she was smiling, and the smile was the same smile the mirror had given Amaterasu, a returning. A thing offered back unchanged, only enlarged, only warmer, only more completely itself than it had been in the dark. The great round mirror turned on its branch, slowly, and across the whole of Takamagahara the light was everywhere at once. The world exhaled. It was not a sound, or it was a sound so large and slow and diffuse that it was indistinguishable from the air itself moving, from the grasses bending in the morning warmth, from the surface of the rivers going bright and soft and bright again, from the fields below warming the way fields warm when the sun has come back after a long gray day, every blade and root receiving the warmth with its whole surface. The gods grew quiet. One by one, and without being asked, they settled back into the soft grass of the hillside, some sitting and some lying down, and the warmth of the morning was on all of them, and the fires that had burned through the night were barely visible now, in the full light of day. Their small flames present but modest, doing their work, but no longer carrying the world's warmth alone. The sakaki tree stood in the sunlight, with its jewels turning golden, and its pale streamers going white as new linen, and its mirror giving back the morning in its round and generous face. The wave of the welcome had passed, and what was left behind was the very best of it, the warmth remaining. Things prepared with love and offered freely do not diminish when they have been received. They settle into the place they were always meant for. The welcome for Amaterasu had been made with patience and with no demand attached to it. And now that she had stepped through it, the welcome was everywhere, as present in the morning light on the grasses, as it was in the careful hands that had dressed the sakaki tree, as present in the warmth on your face, as in those slow and patient hours when the fires were small and the world was blue-gray and holding its breath. Nothing needs finishing. This is the whole of it. The light has come home. The warmth has come home, without effort, without force, drawn out gently by laughter and roosters and the face of the mirror, by the oldest and simplest truth that what is beautiful wishes to be seen, and what loves the world will come back to it when the welcome itself is made of love. The stone rests to one side of the cave mouth, the Shimenawa drawn softly across. The fields of Takamagahara, warm in the full sweet light, amber honey, and even, the color that means morning and returning, and the long patient world turned back toward its own warmth. The rivers run bright. The deep grasses of the high plain bend and recover in a slow, soft wind that knows it is allowed to be warm again. And Amaterasu stands in the open morning with the gods of heaven around her, and the world is well. And here, now, the story lets you go completely. You are allowed to sleep. The sun is home. The world is warm. Everything that was waiting has stopped waiting, gently and without urgency. And what is left is only the warmth of the thing resolved, the particular piece of a story that has arrived exactly where it meant to arrive, without hurry, without force, without anything but its own slow and patient unfolding. Let the story go soft now. Let the hillside go soft, and the jeweled tree, and the mirror with its morning face, and the warm gold light on the long grasses of the high plain. Let the names of things loosen: Amaterasu, Ame no Uzume, Ame no Tajikarao, the Shimanawa, the Magatama, the Sakaki tree, the bronze mirror that gathered the light and gave it back whole. Let them dissolve gently into the feeling beneath the names, which is warmth and returning, and the deep rightness of something loved coming home. That feeling will remain even after the names are gone, the way warmth remains in stone after the fire has moved elsewhere, steady and slow and sure. The kami are resting on the hillside. The fires have burned down to their last quiet ember warmth. The roosters are still. The mirror holds the sun, and the sun holds the morning, and the morning holds the whole wide world of the high plain, and all of it is easy, all of it is well. You can let yourself be part of that completeness. Let the warmth of it be the warmth of wherever you are lying. Let the morning light of Takamagahara be as distant and gentle as a dream, already fading at the edges, present only as a feeling as the details go soft. There is nothing more to follow here. Let your breath be slow. Let the warmth of the morning light on the high plain be the last thing you carry with you, not as a thought, not as an image, but as a feeling only. The feeling of honey light and returning, and the gentle fullness of something long, waited for, and at last, without effort, at last, received. The stone is still, the rope is drawn, the mirror is warm, the world is well. Let it all grow small and warm and far away, like a lamp burning quietly in a room at the end of a long hall, steady and unhurried, asking nothing of you, only there, only warm, only light, and let yourself go. Chapter 7. The Sleepy Serpent of Izumo. Let your breathing slow. Let the room go gentle at its edges. Now we are going a long way down from the high plain of heaven, down through the soft layers of cloud and warm air, all the way to the earth below, where the golden light of the sun goddess has been coming for days now, steady and honey warm, spreading its slow abundance across fields and hills and rivers, the way warmth returns to a room after a long winter morning, unhurried and sure. Down there in the earthly world, in a quiet land by the sea called Izumo, a river moves through broad green valleys, and the hills rise soft and blue above it, and the land is, tonight, very still. That is where our story rests tonight. Come down gently with me. The land of Izumo, that quiet earthly country where the hills folded into one another like sleeping bodies, and the river ran wide and unhurried between banks of pale river stone, lay warm and open under the returning light. It had been some days since the golden brightness had come back into the world, flooding down from the high plain of heaven after its long absence, and Izumo had received it the way all earthly things received warmth after a long waiting. Slowly at first, cautiously, the way a person waking on a quiet morning turns toward the window before they are quite awake, not yet certain the brightness is real. And then more fully, more easily, as the light persisted, the fields greening, the river catching gold and silver in its wide bends, the hillsides breathing out their morning mist and letting the sun find the old dark soil beneath. The air had the quality of early autumn, not the sharp autumn of cold mornings and bare branches, but the first autumn, the one that is still mostly summer, that smells of warm earth and something slightly sweet, a fullness at the edge of ripeness that is not yet letting go. The light in the valley came long and even, slanting from the south, and where it crossed the surface of the river, it left a shifting, soft brightness that moved like something alive and slow, something breathing. The valley was quiet in the particular way of places where the land itself is very old. There were villages in Izumo, and there were people in those villages who knew the hills by name and the turns of the river by heart, who had lived there for more generations than anyone could count, and who moved through their days with the ease of people for whom the landscape is a kind of body, familiar, close, trusted, deeply held. But on this afternoon the valley was still, and the light lay across the hills in long warm bands, and the river moved on its old path the way rivers have always moved, without hurry, without purpose, with the calm authority of something that has been doing this particular thing since long before anyone was watching. It was into this quiet that Susanoo came. He came down from the sky the way a storm comes down once the storm is finished, slowly, without intention, with a kind of leftover movement that was less arrival than gradual settling. His heavy weather was spent. All the great gray pressure of it, all the wide salt wind and the long, low roll of thunder, all the rain and the darkness that had driven him through the upper air for so long, that had passed from him the way clouds pass after they have given everything they have to give, and what remained was something much gentler and quieter, and in its quietness, more fully itself. He was Susanoo still, the storm god, the wide-breathing one born from his father's exhalation over the river of grief, but he was that the way a sea is still itself on a morning after long weather, when the waves have softened and the surface lies in long easy swells, and there is more light than shadow on the water. He carried himself lightly now. The air around him had no charge to it. He moved through the valley mist without displacing it. He found the river in the late afternoon. He sat down beside it, on the wide pale stones of its near bank, and let the sound of the water come to him. That particular sound a wide, shallow river makes when it runs over smooth stone, which is not a rushing sound and not a dripping sound, but something between the two. A continuous, soft unraveling of water across surface, like the sound a long exhale makes when the breath is finally, fully released. He had been sitting there for some time, simply listening, when he heard the sound of people coming along the bank. They were an old couple, and they walked with the careful deliberateness of people who have been walking these paths long enough to know every root and every stone, but who are also now, being old, willing to take their time with knowing. The man walked with a staff cut from some dark wood, smooth worn at the grip from long use. The woman walked with her hands loosely at her sides, her head slightly bowed, not from sadness, but from the habitual attention of someone who has spent a lifetime looking at the ground she is moving across and finding it worthy of notice. Between them, walking quietly and close, was their daughter, a young they were an old couple, and they walked with the careful deliberateness of people who have been walking these paths long enough to know every root and every stone, but who are also now, being old, willing to take their time with knowing. The man walked with a staff cut from some dark wood, smooth worn at the grip from long use. The woman walked with her hands loosely at her sides, her head slightly bowed, not from sadness, but from the habitual attention of someone who has spent a lifetime looking at the ground she is moving across and finding it worthy of notice. Between them, walking quietly and close, was their daughter, a young woman with a gentle face and something in her bearing that was very still, the way still water is still, not from the absence of life, but from a depth that is simply not troubled at the surface. This was Kushinada Haime, the gentle daughter of Izumo, and she walked in the long, honey-warm light of the late afternoon with her parents, and she did not speak, and neither did they. And the three of them together made a picture of a kind of quietness that is not sad and not happy, but simply old and full. The quietness of people who have been together a long time and have arrived at the understanding that presence itself, the shared warmth of it, is enough. Susanoo watched them come and felt something settle further in him. He did not alarm them. He was, after all, quieter than he had been in a very long time, and he met their eyes with a calmness they could feel, and they sat with him beside the river, the way people sit with a stranger who has that particular quality of being still, of not needing anything, of being simply and fully present in the place they have arrived at. They shared the warmth of the late light together. It was the old man who spoke first of the serpent. He spoke of it the way people speak of the old familiar things that have shaped their lives, not dramatically, not in fear, but with the weary affection one holds for a fact of the world that has been a fact for so long it has become almost indistinguishable from the landscape itself. He told Susanoo that each year, when the autumn light came long and golden like this through the valley, the great old serpent of the hills would come down. Yamata no Orochi, the vast old serpent. He was ancient, older than anyone could remember, older than the names the people of Izumo had for old things. He lived in the high hills above the valley, in the deep dark folds of the land where the mist gathered even in summer, and the mosses grew thick and very green on everything, and he was enormous in the way that only very old things are enormous, not merely large, but accumulated, as though his size were the result of simply having been here so long, of having taken in so many seasons and slow years that the mass of all that time had settled into him the way mineral settles into stone, layer by patient layer, until the stone itself is something extraordinary. He had 8 heads and 8 long tails. His body stretched across 8 valleys and 8 hills, and on his back the moss grew thick and deep as a forest floor, and small trees had taken root in the ancient ridges of his spine. And his eyes, all 8 pairs of them, each set low and heavy-lidded, were the soft dark red of winter cherries, the color of something that has held warmth so long it glows with it even in the cold. He was not terrible. He was simply vast and very old, and each year when the autumn settled in, profoundly restless. The restlessness was the problem, the old man explained. In the long warmth of summer, the serpent slept easily in his high hills. The mist around him and the cool of the deep ground beneath, and the small trees growing undisturbed on his patient back. But when the season turned and the light came long and golden, and something in the air changed its quality, some shift in the angle of things, some new coolness in the deepest hours, he would rouse himself with a slow and enormous effort and come down from the hills, not from menace, but from a kind of thirst and restlessness he did not seem to know how to ease. He would move through the valley searching for something to quiet the feeling inside him, and he would not find it, and he would move on, restless still. Susanoo listened to all of this. He sat by the river in the long afternoon light and he listened, and when the old man had finished speaking, Susanoo sat quietly for a moment more, feeling the way the warm air moved across the back of his hands and thinking, without urgency, about what he knew of restlessness and the difficulty of finding rest. He understood that feeling from the inside. He had been that once. The weather of it, the heaviness that moved without purpose, that churned without clearing, that carried its own weight through the upper world and could not set it down. And he had not found rest by effort. He had not resolved the feeling by pressing through it. He had found rest the way weather finally finds rest, by giving everything away, by letting the clouds release what they were carrying, by allowing the pressure to simply be what it was until it was no longer what it was, and something else, lighter and cleaner, took its place. But the vast old serpent could not do this alone. What the serpent needed was something warm and heavy and sweet, something to lean into the way a tired animal leans into a warm wall on a cold night, something that would meet the restlessness with a kind of generous gentleness and say, without words, you can put it down now. It is all right. You can rest. He asked the old couple for 8 great vats. He asked for the sweet grain of the valley, and for water from the river, and for the warmth of their fires, and the time to let the slow transformation work itself through. And over the following days, while the old couple and their gentle daughter went about the quiet business of their lives, and the light shifted and deepened across the valley, and the mist came earlier in the mornings, and the smell of the earth grew fuller and richer, Susanoo brewed what he had promised. 8 great vats of sake, not the sharp, quick sack of ceremony, but a slow and deeply warmed version of it, brewed long and low, stirred with the same patience with which you would stir warm milk before sleep, allowed to develop in the warmth beside the fire over many days until the smell of it was something extraordinary, sweet and heavy and deeply comforting, the way the smell of something baking in a warm house is comforting, the way the smell of summer grain cut and lying in a field in the evening light is comforting, a smell that reached directly into some old and wordless part of the body and said, "Good, this is good, you are home." He set the 8 vats in a long, slow line along the floor of the valley, each one placed in a low and easy spot where the ground was level and soft, and the light came gently, and the sound of the river was near. And then they waited. The evening came down warm and amber from the west, and the valley held the last of the light in its wide bowl long after the hills had gone dark, and the mist began to gather at the upper edges of the tree line, and somewhere above, in the deep, high folds of the land, where the old serpent slept through his summer, something enormous began, very slowly, to move. The sound of it reached the valley long before he arrived. Not a frightening sound, not a crashing or a shaking, but something low and gradual and continuous, the sound of enormous weight moving through deep-rooted country, a sound like the distant murmur of many streams, like wind through a very large space. The small trees on the valley floor did not bend. The river did not change its pace. The sound simply grew, and in growing it became more fully what it was, the sound of something old and very large, coming slowly down from the hills. He came out of the tree line as the last true amber of evening was leaving the sky, and he was immense. 8 heads moving slowly above the tree line, each one lowered in the heavy, drowsy way of something that has not yet fully woken from its summer sleep, each one weaving slightly as they moved, not with any aggression, but with the slow, involuntary sway of a creature still half caught in the thickness of a long rest, still moving through the internal weather of its own deep dreaming. His tail swept through the low brush behind him without hurry. The moss on his back was dark with the night coming into it, and the small trees moved as he moved, and his eyes, all 8 pairs of them, shone that soft, deep cherry red in the gathering dark, warm as banked coals, patient and enormous and old. He smelled the sake from a great distance. He paused at the edge of the valley, all 8 heads lifting, slowly, the way a creature lifts when something has reached it through the air, not startled, only attentive, the attention of something very old and very large that has learned patience from the inside out and knows how to stay with a thing until it becomes clear. Then, one by one, the heads came down. The first head found the first vat and drank. It was a long and slow and deeply unhurried drinking, the kind that happens when something thirsty and warm finds exactly the warmth and sweetness it did not know it was looking for, the kind where the drinking itself is already a form of rest, where the throat opens and the warmth goes down, and every part of the body that was held slightly tight begins by degrees to loosen. The great head settled lower as he drank, the neck growing soft, the immense weight of the head beginning to yield to something that was neither waking nor sleep, but the beautiful country between them. The second head found the second vat, the third, the fourth and fifth together, those heads moving side by side, drinking in long, slow pulls, their eyes growing softer and heavier with each long moment, the deep cherry red dimming warmly the way a fire dims when it has found a steady, low-lasting heat and no longer needs to flare. The smell of the sake rose warm through the valley and mixed with the smell of the evening earth and the moss and the deep-rooted patience of the hills, and the whole valley held this warmth the way a room holds warmth when many fires have been burning in it for a long time, and the walls themselves have become warm, and the warmth is everywhere at once, sourceless and full. The sixth head drank. The seventh drank slowly, almost already asleep, the great head resting between long pulls. Against the rim of the vat, the neck slack and the eye half closed, and the whole enormous body settling, the way a very large and very old animal settles when it finally finds the place where rest is possible, when the thing that has been moving through it without rest for so long begins to still itself from the inside, cell by ancient cell, the long settling of enormous and patient life. The eighth head drank last, and when it had finished, it rested. The vast old serpent lay down across the hills of Izumo in the warm darkness, his 8 heads lowered into the soft earth, the moss on his back unstirring, the small trees quiet. He lay across 8 valleys and 8 hills, the way a cloud lies across a mountain range, distributed and calm and fully belonging to the landscape, more landscape than creature, a warm, enormous slowness that had found its place and stopped asking for anything more than this. His breathing was deep and even and very slow. His eyes were closed. He slept. Susanoo stood in the valley and listened to the immensity of that sleep, the way it changed the air around it, the way it thickened the quiet, the way the whole valley seemed to exhale with the serpent's first long sleeping breath, and then settle into a new and deeper stillness. He stood there for a long time, simply listening. Then, softly, he walked along the length of the sleeping body. Near the last of the vast tails, curled gently in the shadow of a hillside, something gleamed. He saw it before he reached it, a faint brightness in the soft dark, nestled in the long, slow curve of the tail, the way a stone left by an old river rests in a bend of earth, worn smooth by time and motion, and all the slow years of being exactly where it was. It was a sword, long and fine, resting in the warmth of the serpent's sleeping body, and it had been there so long it had taken on something of the quality of the thing it rested in, ancient, unhurried, deeply settled. Susanoo reached for it with both hands. He drew it free as gently as a person draws a thing from a sleeping cat's paws. With all the care and patience that sleeping things deserve, with the tenderness of someone who understands that rest, when it has finally come after a long restlessness, is the most precious thing in any world, and not to be disturbed for anything less than love. The serpent slept on. The sword lay across his palms, warm from its long rest, and Susanoo held it in the quiet valley under the stars of Izumo, and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a very long time. He thought of his sister. He thought of Amaterasu, the sun goddess, the warm golden light that was even now resting somewhere above the dark sky, gathered into its nightly softness, the way a lamp flame is gathered when a glass is placed over it, present but contained, holding its warmth for the morning. He thought of how long he had been away from her, how much weather had passed between them, how many things had been said and unsaid in the long distance. He thought of her light coming down across the valley, reaching even this far, even into these quiet green hills, finding the river and the old pale stones, and the faces of the old couple and their gentle daughter, with the same unhurried warmth. It found everything, the way true warmth always reaches everything eventually if it is given enough time. And he sent the sword up to her. He let it rise, gently, softly, without ceremony, the way a bird rises from a branch in the first light, the way mist rises from a river in the morning warmth, with the simple ease of something going where it belongs. He sent it up through the dark air above Izumo, up through the layers of cloud and cool, up toward the high plain of heaven where she was resting. And as it went, he thought very quietly, in the way thoughts come when the mind is at peace, "This is from me. I am all right. The storm is finished. I am well. A gift of reconciliation. The storm and the sun at peace." Below, the valley rested under the soft bowl of the night sky, the stars where they always were, the river moving its slow and ancient way through the dark, the vast sleeping serpent breathing long and even across the hills, the small trees still, the moss undisturbed, everything settled into the long quiet of a world that has, for now, laid down its restlessness and found its depth. Nothing here needs finishing tonight. The serpent will sleep through many seasons more, and the hills will hold him warmly, and the moss will grow deeper on his back, and the small trees will grow slowly taller, and none of this requires anything of you. Nothing here asks you to watch, or to remember, or to stay. Let it be soft here. Let it be finished. Susanoo settled in the valley, in the warm earthly land of Izumo, and the gentle daughter, Kushinada Hime, was near, and the old couple were near, and the fires were warm, and the night was wide and patient and full of stars, and the sound of the river moved through everything the way warmth moves through a room where people who care for one another have been sitting quietly together, and now, at last, are letting themselves rest. The storm god was, at last, at peace. Chapter 8. The Long Line of Mornings. Let yourself settle now, however you are lying, and let the whole weight of everything, the day, the week, the long accumulation of small necessary things, let it soften out from under you, the way snow softens from the eaves of a roof when the morning grows a little warmer than the morning before. You have carried enough. You do not need to carry it here. The room is quiet, and the dark behind your eyes is gentle, and the breath is already finding its own slow rhythm without you having to ask it to. You don't have to stay awake for any of this. There is no test waiting, no place you are required to arrive. Sleep is already close. You can feel it at the edges, warm and patient, the way sunlight waits at the curtain without forcing its way in. Whenever it finds you tonight, go to it. Let the story drift on without you, the way a river drifts on past a sleeping shore, quiet and sure, going where it goes. Let your breathing slow, let your shoulders settle. Now we are going, for the last and softest time, up to the high plain of heaven, that wide and luminous country above the clouds where the great sun goddess Amaterasu rested in the fullness of all that she had been given and all that she had given back. The world below lay green and golden, turning slowly in its warmth, and the light, that honey-warm, unhurried light that had found its way back to everything, was steady now and sure, and asked nothing of anyone at all. That is where our story comes, tonight, to rest. Come gently, one last time, with me. The high plain of heaven was quiet in the way that only a very full thing can be quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, nor the quiet of waiting, but the deeper quiet of completion, the kind that comes after a long and beautiful thing has finished, when the last note of a song has faded, and the air still holds the shape of it, warm and unhurried, before the room returns entirely to itself. That was the quality of the heavenly plain on this particular morning. Everything that had needed to happen had happened. The light had gone from the world and then returned. The storm and the sun had made their peace. And now the three treasures lay gathered, soft and still, in the keeping of the sun goddess herself. The mirror rested where it had always rested, in the glow of her own radiance, that wide, burnished silver-pale disk that had once, in the dark outside the cave, gathered the light and given it back whole, so that she had turned toward it, wondering, not quite knowing herself in it at first, and then knowing herself entirely. It held no sharp edges. Worn smooth by ages of gentle keeping, it was the kind of object that seemed to breathe. The curved jewels, the magatama, those small comma-shaped stones, the color of deep still water, lay in a soft arrangement, their gentle weight the weight of the earth itself, the weight of the fields and rivers, and the long green shoulders of the hills below. They had hung in the sacred tree outside the cave while the gods prepared their patient welcome, and the firelight had touched them one by one, blue and gold and pale. And the sword, the gift sent up from Izumo by Susanoo, her brother, the one who had stirred up storms and broken things, and then, in his own long time, become quiet, lay at rest in its wrapping the way all sharp things are gentled by enough care and enough years. It was not a dangerous object here. It was a keepsake. It was what love looks like when it is unhurried. All three lay together, and Amaterasu, the sun goddess, looked at them for a long time without moving. The heavenly plain stretched around her in its vast and gentle quiet, the way an open field stretches in the last soft hour before evening, wide and unhurried, the grass moving a little in a slow warm air, the light coming from no particular direction but from everywhere at once, as it does in the hours when the day is neither beginning nor ending, but simply resting in itself. There had been a time when this plain had been dark and still, when she had withdrawn herself behind a great stone door, and the whole heavenly country had gone cold and lightless, and the world below had shivered in its long, unexpected dark. She remembered this the way you remember a dream the morning after, not painfully, not with shame or sorrow, but with a kind of settled recognition, the recognition that comes when you understand that even the darkest passages in a long story are part of what makes its warmth, at the end, feel so complete. She had rested. She had been called back. The light had returned, and it had kept on returning every morning since, without fail. She had not been in any hurry. That was the nature of the high plain of heaven. Time moved there the way deep water moves, not with the quick, bright urgency of a stream over stones, but slowly, carrying everything in it, so that a season might pass before you noticed, and a generation, and still the light would be warm, and the air would carry the smell of green growing things drifting up from far below. She had been thinking for some time about the world beneath the clouds. It was a beautiful world. She had always known this, but knowing a thing and feeling it fully are two different kinds of knowing, and she was, this quiet morning, feeling it fully. She could see it below when the clouds parted. The long green islands laid out across the wide sea, the mountains rising in their soft blue distances, the rivers moving unhurried through the lowlands, the villages with their tended fields and their rising smoke, their people moving small and purposeful across the morning. She watched it the way you might watch a lamp in a window from a long way off on a cold night, with a warmth that had no need to move closer, and yet a warmth that was real. The world needed gentle tending, not managing, not commanding, just the quiet presence of someone who cared for it, the way you care for something you love, attentively and without force. Someone to walk the hills and learn the names of the rivers. Someone to hold the three treasures in trust and to remember, season after season, where they had come from and what they meant. And so she made her decision, softly and without ceremony, the way the best decisions are made, not with great deliberation, but with the settled feeling of someone who has simply arrived, at last, at the thing that was always going to be true. She called to her grandson. He came, Ninigi no Mikoto, her daughter's son, young and unhurried and gentle in the way of those who have grown up near the light, and she regarded him for a long time with the kind of warmth that needed no words to hold it. He stood before her in the golden glow of the heavenly plain, and the light found him the way it always found the things she loved best, slowly, fully, without leaving any part of him in shadow. She told him what she had decided. He would go down, down through the soft layered clouds, down past the trailing mists and the wide quiet sky, down to the peak of the mountain that stood at the southern end of the great green islands, the mountain called Takachiho, where the clouds gathered, and the air tasted of rain and stone, and the high, clean cold of altitude. He would plant his feet on that mountain peak and feel the solidity of the earth below them, and the world would be his to care for. Gently, she lifted the three treasures. She held out the mirror first, that worn, luminous, silver pale mirror that had given the light back whole. And when she placed it in his hands, she spoke to him quietly, the way you speak to someone who is leaving and whom you love, and she told him, "Whenever you look into this mirror, you will see my spirit in it, not my face, not my form, my warmth, my care for you, and so you will never be far from me, however far you walk. The mirror holds what I hold, and what I hold is you." He looked into it. The light inside it was honey warm and steady and very soft. She placed the curved jewels in his keeping next. The magatama, those small watercolored kama-shaped stones, and they settled into his palms the way small stones settle into still water, without a ripple, finding their own rest. And then the sword, wrapped and still, last and lightest in the giving, the gift of a long reconciliation, the weight of everything that had once been sharp and had been gentled. He held all three and stood for a moment in the full warmth of her light. Then the clouds below the heavenly plain parted. Not dramatically. There was nothing dramatic about it, nothing that would quicken a heartbeat or demand attention. The clouds simply opened, the way a door opens when the person on the other side has placed their hand against it and eased it forward, gently, because they know the room beyond is sleeping. One moment the sky below was soft and closed, and then there was a passage, wide and luminous, filled with a diffuse and golden light, and the green world below was visible in it, distant and beautiful, turning slowly in its warmth. Ninigi descended. He moved through the cloud passage the way light moves through still air, not falling but settling, not hurrying but arriving, as though the mountain below were drawing him down by some gentle gravity of its own, patient and unhurried. The clouds folded behind him as he passed. The golden light followed him down, the way it always followed those who carried the sun's warmth in their keeping. And then his feet found the mountain, Takachiho. The stone of it was solid and cold and very real, and the wind at the peak carried the smell of rain and pine and distance. And below the mountain the long green islands spread outward to every horizon, under a sky that was beginning, slowly, to fill with morning. He stood for a long time and simply looked. In his hands, the mirror caught the first pale light of dawn and gave it back. And then, as always, time did what time does. It moved on, softly, the way it always does. Not in great leaps, but in small, quiet steps, season settling into season, morning following morning in its long, unhurried procession. The way beads settle one by one along a string, each one smooth and complete in itself, each one touching the next without urgency. From Ninigi came those who came after him, and from them others in their turn, and each one carried something of the light in them, not as a burden, not as a glory to be displayed, but as a quiet warmth, the way a stone carries the heat of the sun long after the sun has moved on. The green islands were tended, the rivers were known by name. The seasons turned and returned in their long familiar rhythm, and the people in the valleys below lived their lives and grew their rice and built their houses near the water and told their stories in the evenings by the fire. And it was not a loud story. It never had been. It was a long one and a quiet one and a very old one, and it went on in the gentle way that the best things go on, not with fanfare but with persistence, the persistence of water finding its way through stone, of morning finding its way through dark, of warmth returning to a room that has grown cold in the long hours of the night. And then, a child born in the valley where the river bent, and then a woman who grew old watching the same hills her grandmother had watched, and then her grandchildren playing in the same light she had played in, and the seasons doing what the seasons always do, and the mornings doing what mornings always do, and the whole long gentle procession of days, carrying everything forward without rush, without drama, without anything being demanded of anyone, just the steady turning of the world in its warmth, the way it has always turned and will always turn, patient and unhurried and entirely sure of itself. Somewhere among old cedar trees, in a valley where the light came through the canopy, in long soft columns and the air smelled of cedar resin and moss and the quiet earth, there was a shrine, a place of gentle remembering. The buildings there were not ancient in the way that crumbling things are ancient, heavy with their own weight and decay. They were ancient in the way that a living tradition is ancient, renewed with care over the long years, rebuilt softly by hands that understood that some things are honored best by tending them, by keeping them whole, by letting them begin again. There, among the cedars, the sun goddess was remembered, not with urgency, not with the performed devotion of those who worry about being seen to remember. Simply, quietly, the way you might think of someone you love when a quality of light reminds you of them, or when a morning comes that is exactly as warm and golden as the mornings you shared, and you feel for a moment that nothing was ever really lost. The people who tended that quiet place among the cedars, that valley of old trees and soft air, understood something that took most things a very long time to understand. That what you love, you keep by returning to it. not by holding on too tightly, not by refusing to let it change, but by coming back, gently and regularly, the way the light comes back every morning without making a fuss about it. They would rebuild the shrine when the time came, not because the old one had failed, but because the rebuilding itself was a kind of tending, a way of saying, we are still here, and the warmth is still here, and we will keep on returning to it for as long as there are mornings to return. The new building smelled of fresh cut cedar, and the old one smelled of years, and both were the same shrine, and both were the same love, worn smooth by long and faithful keeping. Nothing here needs finishing tonight. Let the cedars hold their quiet. Let the light come through them the way it comes. And here, now, is where the story lets itself go. You have come such a long way with it, through the first drifting mist when there was nothing yet, through the soft shadow of the land below the world, through rivers and storms and sacred trees hung with firelit jewels, through a cave and a mirror and the long gentle lulling of a vast sleepy creature beside a river, through all of it, night by night and breath by breath. And now the story has arrived at the place it was always going, which is simply here. A warm morning, a steady light, a world that is tended and cared for and turning, unhurried, in its long familiar way. You can let it grow soft at the edges now. You don't have to hold it. It will hold itself. The way still water holds the memory of the light long after the light has moved on, gently and without effort, asking nothing. The sun goddess rests in her warmth above the clouds, and the light she gives is the same light it has always been. Honey warm and unhurried, the light that went away once and came back, the light that always comes back, every single morning, without exception, without effort, without asking anything of anyone at all. It rises the way it always rises, over the long green islands and the wide sea, and all the sleeping hills, slow and warm, and entirely sure of itself, because it has done this before, 10,000 times, 100,000, and it will do it again. That is the last thing this story has to give you. Not a name, not a meaning, not anything to carry back with you into the waking world. Only this: the light always returns. Every morning it comes back. Whatever the dark was, however long, however wide, the light finds its way back into it, soft and warm, and completely without hurry. The way warmth finds its way back into a cold room. The way sleep finds its way back to a tired body. Let your breath slow all the way down now. Let the story grow thin and warm, the way a dream grows thin toward morning, beautiful still but lighter, easier to hold, easier to let go. The mirror gives the light back whole. The cedars hold their quiet. The morning comes over the water, and you are allowed, right now, in this breath, in this moment of falling, to put everything down and simply rest and let the whole long line of mornings carry on without you, as it does, as it always has, as it always will, steady and warm and unhurried, turning and returning in its own good time, forever and forever, without end. Let yourself go.